first time I ever heard it. You never know.
Well, it's not live, it's just, recording.
Yeah.
The only thing I wanna do is the timer.
I hear you, yeah.
They'll think it's live and it's not.
The last presentation that they've done. Let's look for it and see.
Tell him that he made it in, make sure they don't keep him.
It's okay, I got somebody else leaving now. I need to get.
Got 3 plants going on.
If anyone has their cell phone, let's make sure you put it on silent.
What was the title of it? What was the title? Remember what we did?
Unless it's a Dutch transmission. You're gonna end up knowing the whole snap. Just fix it. You know, it's transmission fix. Transmission. I'm gonna break it in. Someone's gonna fix it. Someone's gonna figure it out. Okay, you figure it out. You gotta be a man.
But an extra document is what you're saying?
My whole life, when I first moved big. 15 minutes.
Stand for the prayer, please.
what if I could do today, for the sun is just coming up, or for us, or this. You got ready to meet, all of the things that you said. That, we thank you for our soldiers, first responders, those that are serving on the front lines, and continue to provide, freedom, so enjoy, thank you for that. We pray for your blessing on them and their families. Continue on to keep this nation in a place, we understand that, so you, Chairman, so be with us throughout this meeting, the business that's accomplished. Thank you for all that.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we start our meeting, there's a few ground rules we need to set. For you all that's here and those that's online, it'll take about a minute to read it. The Taylor County Board of County Commissioners set up a conference line. The number is 1-917-900-1022. The access code is 32347 pound sign. This is not a toll-free number that may be subject to the long-distance charges according to your long-distance plan. When the chairperson opens the meeting for public comment, please follow the below instructions. If you wish to speak, please dial *5. The moderator will unmute your line when it's your turn to speak and notify you by announcing the last 4 digits of your telephone number. Please announce your name and address. You will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes. Notice is hereby given pursuant to the Florida Statute 286.0105 that a person deciding to appeal any matter considered at this meeting will need a record of the meeting and may need to ensure that a verbatim record of the proceeding is made, which record includes the testimony and evidence on which the appeal is to be based. Any person wishing to address this board regarding to an agenda item will be given 3 minutes for their comments. A commenter may not only speak at one time to an individual issue. Okay? And with that being said, I'm going to ask for approval of the agenda.
Okay, number 9, item number 9, we need to continue that item because it didn't get advertised properly in the newspaper didn't get it in there.
Okay.
So it has been sent to the newspaper again, and it's going to be June the 22nd at 9:10 a.m. That is the public hearing for the commercial leasing of golf carts in Keaton Beach area. So if anybody's here for that, that's going to be continued to June the 22nd.
Mr. Chairman, were there any other changes?
Yes, ma'am. Any other change? That, number 10, the board to discuss Dr. Memorial Hospital board appointment will be moved to number 8. And we will, after 10, after 8, we will do the mud box, okay? So, the first item on there is the consent agenda.
If it's okay, I'll make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Okay, the amended agenda.
Second.
Okay. Motion second, all in favor? Okay. Now we should go to the consent agenda. We got a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
All right, motion and second, all in favor? Okay, we'll go to number 10, the board to discuss Dr. Memorial Hospital board appointment. Is there anyone here to speak to that? That's number 10.
Speak to it.
Yes. The board to discuss Dr. Memorial Hospital board appointment. Is They're the ones that speak to it.
Mr. Dents,
Yes, sir.
that was an item of the board agenda, Dr. Memorial's in the agenda, so how can we speak to it if we don't know what the question is?
If I may approach, I can maybe open it up.
Go ahead.
Ray Curtis, 103 North Jefferson Street, Perry, Florida. So if you recall, for some months, periodically, we've been coming before the board and updating you on kind of the investigation into the intersect between Chapter 155 Florida statutes, which was the basis of our hospital system forming in Taylor County, and where we are with how we operate our county hospital system today. And so I believe the last time that we came before the board had asked for a copy of kind of a flow chart that had option A and option B. And option A is to have a separate oversight board set forth under Chapter 155 that would have its own own requirements, sunshine requirements, and things like that, and that would be separate from the DMH Inc. Board of Directors, which is a private company. And option number two would be to have a blended DMH Inc. Board of Directors, which, as I had advised you in prior meetings, if they're blended together, some of the sunshine exemption that the private corporation would have would be kind of vitiated if you have a public sunshine board of 5 public officers sitting on that same board. And so those are kind of two options this board asked for. Having a copy of the flow chart that kind of gave pros and cons as option A and B. And I think then wanted to come back and just follow up on after having reviewed that. I have copies of that flow chart that I made 10 copies. I'd be happy to pass them around if it would help further discussion.
Okay.
Mr. Chairperson, if I can just ask for clarification. This item was tabled from a special meeting that was scheduled on, I believe, May 25th or somewhere around there. And I thought the question that needed to be answered at that time was regarding one particular appointment. And Conrad, did you receive an opinion about that?
Yes, I did. It was a verbal opinion from Mr. Chris Anderson, who's been an ethics attorney for the state for over 30 years. I've been calling him for many years. And under the statute, it stated that there was an exception to the problem of being a conflict with municipalities of under 35,000 folks. And I provided that statute to the attorney for DMH, Mr. Klein Moore. The problem with that, when I talked with Mr. Anderson, it doesn't apply to counties. It only applies to municipalities. So it was his opinion that was a conflict.
Okay.
I'm confused. What was a conflict?
This is
One of our
regarding
board
Mr.
members had a
Chris.
conflict.
I'm sorry?
That's his sister.
Right.
That's Mr. Moore's sister.
On the board.
I see. Okay, I'm following now. So separate issue from the conflict between service of a TMH employee on the oversight board.
Right,
Okay.
but that was what this was about, as a practical matter.
That's what today's hearing is about, not about option A and B?
Correct. Because that was what was tabled from the previous meeting, because DMH was unable to attend at that time.
Please. Chairman Dempsey, County Commissioner Chris Schmidt, Chief Executive Officer for DMH 333 North Byron Parkway. We've personally gone out to seek another opinion, another ethical opinion specifically to this because of the language that was brought forth by the opinion rendered to the Congress. So we're doing that as we speak. Get that back. Bring that to the
May I ask from whom you're getting the opinion?
I know that Mr. Moore was submitting that. I do not know the name.
Okay, it's not the attorney.
It was from the Ethics Commission.
Okay, it's from the Ethics Commission? Okay. Well, that'll take a while, as a practical matter, sir. And I advised, Mr. Moore to call Chris Anderson, gave him his phone number, and that might expedite things if he called him. So, I'm not telling him what to do, I just gave him the phone number and also the statute number. He called me again and asked for the statute number. It's 112.3125. You better write that down. Make sure I got it right.
So if I understand then, you have a verbal opinion from the ethics board.
Not the board, an attorney who gives opinions that I've been calling for over 30 years.
Oh, okay. So you're going through the ethics board? Oh, okay.
We need to table this until we hear from them.
Again, I'm not sure what this newest conflict is. If you recall, I got a written opinion from the Ethics Commission, one of the attorneys that works there, some 8 or 10 months ago on the service of Ashley McCormick on the DMH Inc. private board or on the oversight board. If that's what we're talking about, we have a written opinion in hand. If we're not talking about that,
No, we're talking about someone else. We're talking about the board appointed Patricia Tripp.
okay.
Okay? It's not your, unless you get involved, it's not your.
Right.
Okay?
Okay, sorry, I just want to make sure when we're talking about Ethics Commission that we're not crossing paths, and so I was not read in on that. It just said DMH Inc. board discussion, so
I understand.
I assumed it was on the issue of.
I understand.
Yeah, let's table that until we get a board from, opinion from the board. That's.
Thank you.
Speak on that.
Right here, Mr. Davis.
I'd like to speak on that.
Okay, come on, Bill.
And while I'm here, since the time, he won't allow but so much time, Ashley McCormick has nothing to do with conflict of interest. You're spinning the wheels, or you're going backwards. If you want to hear about that, I can give that
No,
tonight
we
too.
don't hear about that tonight.
But, a conflict of interest is either in fact or in appearance. But it's got to do with an action. What is the action that Priscilla Tripp and her brother Jim Moody have done? What is that action? There is no action. They have done nothing. Congress, please. 3 minutes is short. Generally, you talk about nepotism, you're talking about a relative. But it's not a relative, it's a relative or good friend. And the Ethics Commission only gives an opinion, takes a judge. Just some other instances. You as county commissioners, you approve your own salary. Is that not a conflict?
They don't.
We do not.
Pardon?
They don't approve their own salary.
They most certainly do.
No, they don't.
They most certainly do through the budget process.
It's set by the legislature.
Well, let's go to another office. If your wife works in another office, you're approving the budget in that office, approving her salary. That's not a conflict. But for there to be a conflict, there's gotta be an action. There is no action in this case. Every one of you may face a conflict of interest at some time. But just sitting here, you can't say you got a conflict of interest because he might want to spend something in sports. When Ashley was appointed, she's an employee of Doctors Memorial Hospital. This board never said anything about that being a conflict of interest. Travis works for a competitor of Doctors Memorial Hospital. Was that brought up as a conflict of interest? No, but that is a conflict of interest. And all of a sudden, Priscilla's got a conflict. Priscilla doesn't have a conflict until she does something. She's done nothing. Nor has Jim, nor any of you. But you all, especially Thomas, because he's related to everybody here. But until there's some action, there is no conflict. It may eventually, but right now, it's not.
Go ahead.
I just want to make it clear that I don't recall us saying that there was a conflict of interest. I believe there was a question asked, is there a conflict of interest? And our attorney said he would find out. That's what happened. Okay, that's what happened. We asked, and we have the right to ask a question if there's any doubt.
Sure.
So that's what we did.
I'd like to know what the question was and how it was worded, and why not get the written opinion?
Well, okay. Anything?
No.
We're gonna move this to, who's the next meeting? Or when we get there? Yeah. All right. We need a motion?
See if we get the other.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, good deal. Now, we will go back to number 8, the board to hold a public hearing set for this date at 6 p.m. or soon after, for a possible hearing or application for a special event permit, Mud Bog, to be held at the Iron Horse Mud Ranch. Okay?
Mr. Chairperson, what order would you like, speakers to go in? We have people from the public, we have attorneys on either side, and then we also have callers who are waiting to speak.
Okay, let's go with the attorney that we got, then the speaker from the public, and then the call. Okay? Is that all right with you? Okay. An attorney, your attorney.
Good evening, commissioners, members of the public. My name is Sid Bigham. I'm with Berger Singerman in Tallahassee, and I represent Iron Horse Mud Bog. I was here at the workshop that was held a few months back on this matter, and at that time, I promised this commission, very sincerely, to do everything that I could to work with counsel for the Lees to try to find a resolution to the neighbors' differences on this matter. I'm very sorry to tell you that despite my best efforts, and I can say it despite the efforts of Mr. Curtis as well, we have not been able to reach that resolution. I'd like to take just a few minutes to explain to the commission what that process looked like, and explain to the commission why we have to come before you today and ask for your help. If I may have permission to approach, I'm gonna pass out a handout, which is on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The dispute between the Lees and the Larsons began with a concern raised by the Lees about this access road. This is the only means of ingress and egress to the Iron Horse Mud Bog. Okay? The Lees own the land to the north of that. A company called Ambuland LLC owns the land to the south. At the far western end, you have the Iron Horse Mud Bog. This is the only means of ingress and egress, and it's the only practical way to get patrons to events at this location. Okay? At the top of that, if we can move the timer just a little bit off there, at the top on the northern edge, you see 4 dots. Each of those dots marks an access gate to the Lees parcels, the Lees property. The easternmost dot, the one closest to US Highway 19 South, that is outside of the great big metal gate, the great big iron gate where you see Iron Horse Mud Bar. That would be the logical place to ensure access to the lease. It's nearest to the highway. They have a road going from there onto their property. But nevertheless, the lease demanded that we provide an amendment to our access easement to guarantee them access to their property, not via that point next to Highway 19, which is outside the gates and outside the fence, but all the way on the western end, right near where we take tickets and admit people to the property. It is logistically the most difficult place to enable access to the leased property. However,
Would you point to that red dot that you just described?
yes, they've asked that we permit access to the westernmost point, which would be the far left, if you're looking at it from this direction, far left, or from this direction, far left. That access gate, the fourth one from the right. The one on the way on the right is outside the main gate and very close to US Highway 19. This one is right next to the stand where we take tickets. Now, we promised this commission at the last meeting that we would do everything we could to resolve this in a neighborly fashion. And so what we did is we offered them to guarantee access at that westernmost point, nearest where we give out or take tickets and take payments, despite the extreme inconvenience of doing so. We presented a proposed amendment to the easement that caused Mr. Lee to give up nothing. In fact, it said that Mr. Lee can withdraw his waiver at any time, and if he does so, the easement just goes back to its original state. This is no skin off of his back. He rejected that offer. We gave up everything. He gave up nothing, and he rejected that offer. You know what that tells me? Mr. Lee's not interested in settling this. This is effectively a hostage situation. The Lees are holding this commission, they're holding the public, they're holding the patrons who want to come to Taylor County hostage, and it's over a power trip. I'm so sorry to have to bring y'all into this, and I know the commission doesn't want to get involved, but you're involved now, because there's nothing we can do. We have two choices. We can come to you like we're coming to you today, begging you to amend this ordinance. And if we can't get a commitment out of you guys to amend this ordinance, we have to take it to court. This ordinance is unconstitutional. It's an invalid delegation of the regulatory authority of this county to private individuals. And that proposition is supported by multiple Supreme Court precedents, including two, which I'll hand to the county attorney. One is Phillips Petroleum Company versus Anderson, 74 SOTD 544. Another is Robert Mays v. County of Sarasota, 177 SOTD 665. These two cases stand for the proposition that a local government cannot delegate to any individual or group of individuals absolute discretion over whether a regulatory permit can be issued. They cannot delegate that with absolute discretion, with no standards, no guidelines, and no judicial oversight. And yet that's exactly what this ordinance does. And again, I hate being in this position. I do not want this county to spend unnecessary legal fees on a losing battle. I do not want the Larsons to have to spend legal fees and push off their October event at the end of this year. Let's keep in mind, each one of these events brings in $3.3 million to this county. Y'all know how sorely needed those resources are. We are coming here to you all on our knees asking you, please do not force us to do that. I am under instructions to begin drafting that complaint and to file it forthwith unless we can obtain a permit or a concession from this county that this ordinance is going to be amended. I'm sorry that you're being held hostage, but it is despite our best efforts. We've done everything we possibly can, and so we're coming to you with our hat in our hands on behalf of the public, on behalf of the dozens of vendors and employees and contractors who rely on paychecks from these events, on behalf of the people of this county who rely on the services that you all provide, funded by the taxes that are collected from this event. I'm sorry that you all are dragged into this. I know you didn't want to become involved, but I hope you understand it wasn't our choice to get you involved. But I have good people running a solid business, providing benefits to this community, and they're being held hostage by a single individual, basically just for power, just for the ability to hold it over their heads every time they want to have an event. We offered everything he could have wanted, and he blew up the negotiations at the last moment. I'm as surprised as you are. I am. And it's a testament to the people of this county that this ordinance has never been abused in this fashion. But the truth is, it's a flaw in the ordinance that it can be abused in this fashion. And that's what's happening. And it's not right. It's not fair to y'all. It's not fair to the public. It's not fair to the Larsons. I'm asking you for two things today. We would like a decision by vote on whether the permit will be issued. We would like to have that determination made in writing, an approval or a denial. We would also like a commitment from this board to amend the ordinance to rid us of this loophole, which enables a single individual to lord power over the entire county. It's not right. This is not an easy thing to ask of y'all, and I'm sorry to have to do it, but it's my job to do that here today. We really do not want to file a lawsuit, but we will. Okay? We will if we have to. We don't want to. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is anyone from the league would like to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bigham, thank you. Of note, a couple things that Mr. Bigham said. One, he said, we were gracious enough, we referring to Iron Horse, to agree for access to that westernmost point. Respectfully, the Lees and Andy Land own the road. It's by their grace in signing an original easement agreement that Iron Horse has access at all. So it's not that Iron Horse is allowing access to the Lees, it's the other way around. It's Lees land, Andy Land's land first. Secondly, the city attorney can attest to how agreements get bounced back and forth with suggested edits on one side and suggested edits on another. And so I disagree with Mr. Bigham's representation that Iron Horse gave everything during the settlement negotiations, and it was still not accepted. The last draft of the agreement and the edits are colored depending on who made the edits, and red or blue, and I don't know how well you can see it, and I'll turn it to the crowd in a minute. But almost the entire document is in red and blue and highlights. Those are edits and counter edits. Okay, that's the last draft to be circulated back and forth. Okay, so it's not as if it was a black and white document and just one side made edits across it and said do this or else. There have been in the past and are still today have been edits and counter edits going back and forth. Now, the Lees aren't opposed to an ordinance amendment. In fact, the last document we circulated to the county administrator was a draft ordinance amendment. And I have copies that I can provide to the board and opposing counsel. Opposing counsel has it, but may I approach?
Yes.
And the thought with this, while I'm passing this out, Mr. Bigham didn't represent to you one time that there was any holding out for money or any payment or anything like that by the Lees, because to my knowledge, in the time that myself and my firm have been involved with this, there's not been any financial remuneration involved or suggested. It's just, excuse me? Oh, okay.
They want to fill this out.
Gotcha. So as far as I know, unless there have been conversations that happened between the parties outside of my presence, it's never been, well, if you'll pay me X amount of dollars or something like that, then I'll sign a waiver or something like that, that you might, a layperson might term as extortion or financial extortion. But getting to this draft amendment, so the black and white portions are your current county codes that exist related to mudbogging events and concerts, because you have basically mirror image language for both of those types of outdoor events. And the 660-foot portion is the buffer, so if you're gonna have a concert, unless the neighbors say, hey, you can push out, right up to my property line, you gotta stay 660 feet off. In the application that Iron Horse has submitted today, you'll notice in several parts that, Iron Horse said, hey, we pushed the footprint over 660 feet inside of the property as to this landowner. Okay, no waiver required, right? Or we've, I noticed where one neighbor had written on a piece of property, as long as it's 450 feet out. So they consented to it being less than 660 feet. And so as I understand it today, it's just a permit application. Are you going to grant the permit or deny it? Your code says you're gonna have waivers, you don't have any waivers. It seems like that's probably the easy part is deny it. It's written in pretty plainly in black and white. But the Lees are in support of you amending the ordinance. They don't want the waiver power. What they want is on, I think, page 5, you'll see it highlighted in red, and these are the proposed additions. And it's attempted to be written in such a way that it would apply to all public events, not just to this specific public event, but to any public event. So if ingress and egress to the event is by way of a non-public roadway, the applicant will not be required to obtain a waiver from the landowner whose land is contiguous to the non-public roadway. So in this case, that would apply to the Lees, would have to get a waiver from the Lees. If the applicant does the following things: one, submits with the application a plan to designate a 20-foot wide section of the entire length of the non-public road that will be utilized well, it was not supposed to be utilized for guests, it's a typo, but essentially take 20 feet of the road and it's for EMS, law enforcement, fire, and for that landowner that happens to butt up against the non-public road. So in this particular case, you'd have a dedicated 20-foot lane for your emergency responders. If there's an event, an emergency event, I would think it would be prudent for everybody involved that we know there's a designated lane for those folks to get in and out quickly, right? And then that would also be what the adjoining landowner can use. So that way, the remainder of this non-public road, you would be able to stack up as many trucks and mud trucks and trailers as you want, and it's not gonna interfere with his landowner that actually owns the dirt underneath, Mr. Lee or Andy Land. And it also would make sure that law enforcement, fire, EMS, et cetera, are not interfered with if they have to rescue somebody or have to interdict or intervene. And so that's the gist of what they're proposing is establish a designated lane for emergency and for those landowners that live there to get by, and then you don't have to get a waiver. And then if that neighboring landowner observes that even though they committed to do those things, they said they were gonna have a designated lane, but they just don't, they don't maintain it, it's clogged, it's blocking everybody, then that neighbor could come back before the commission, essentially provide an affidavit and have a hearing where they say, here's pictures, here's this or that show that it wasn't being maintained, and at that point, for the next event, it'd have to be, the waiver requirement would get back in place. So it takes the onus off of the neighbor to hold the waiver, and it puts it on the applicant. It says, hey, if you do the responsible thing and you make it a designated emergency personnel and landowner, subservient landowner, designated lane, you don't have to get a waiver. And that's where the Lees are as of whenever this was circulated around back, roughly, it looks like, maybe late May. No, this would have been circulated around, or sent to the county back on sometime around May 7th, May 8th. And as of today, the Lees are still on board. So if the county were interested in modifying the ordinance and taking it away from the Lees, where they don't have to make a decision and saying to the applicant, hey, put in this designated roadway or this designated path for emergency services plus the landowner and no permit. And they do good with that. And so as to their permit application, if you're following your law and your law is black and white, have to have waivers in hand. They don't have waivers in hand, admittedly, not from all the owners, then you should deny that. But instead of just saying denied and let's move on with the conversation, just so a lawsuit can be filed and the ordinance can be challenged, modify your ordinance. Give the applicant an outlet where they have the choice. If they put in a safety precaution essentially, then the landowners can't withhold it. And so, it would seem to me that would remove at least part of the standing for a suit. So 2 birds, 1 stone. So that's kind of where the Lees are. It's just dedicated the MS Leo way that they can use as well as cordon off with cones or a strip or something like that. And then no waiver. And that takes care of it. But that's where they are. Be happy to field any questions from the board. Not sure how clearly that came across. Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, I know that the rules say only 1 per go, and I wouldn't mind if Mr. Curtis had an opportunity to respond to what I'm about to say, but in the interest of moving this conversation forward, and since I didn't use all my time, I'd like a chance to just respond to that.
3 minutes, go ahead.
Thank you. There are 3 reasons why that proposal is impracticable, okay? At certain points on this road, we only have 30 feet of width. We need at least 12 feet, 11 inches to get these trucks through. Giving up 20 feet means that they can't come through anymore. That means the event's effectively canceled. Number 2, the Swanee River Water Management District will not authorize any widening of this road. Number 3, as was disseminated previously, and I'm not sure if we have this on a scan, but this was at the last meeting as well. It's not just the access way that is within 660 feet of the Lee's property. If you look at the top of this aerial, and they may have this here as the other document that I provided, I think it's interior or something. There's an area of land on the north side that you see depicted in orange on that aerial. That's within 660 feet of the Lee's land. This is outside of the access road, but it's on the Larson's property. They need this area to stage folks where they're getting waivers from families with children to search for weapons and dangerous things, glass, before people come onto the property. This is no real solution. And I didn't mention it because it's no real solution, but I'm happy to talk with you about it now. This does not solve the problem. This kicks the can down the road, and it's a perfect example of what Mr. Lee has been doing from the beginning, which is to change the target, present us with a moving target. If all he wants is to guarantee access, which is what everybody says, all he wants is to guarantee access to his property, we will give it to him in the form of an amended easement, and y'all don't have to touch the ordinance. That's not what he wants. He wants to continue to hold this over the Larsons. He wants to continue to have power, and he wants to hold this commission and the people of this county and the patrons who want to come here hostage. And it's what he's going to keep doing until we do the right thing. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that's the situation. And that's why this is impracticable. And that's why we didn't accept it. We've offered him the exact same thing that this ordinance says in the form of an easement amendment, in the form of making sure he will have the ability to come in and out. Why is that any different than what this proposed ordinance would say? It's not, except for one thing. This proposed ordinance that they proposed doesn't deal with the fact that we still need the space on the north side of our land to screen vehicles for security before they come onto the park. So guess what? We passed this ordinance, we'll be back here next time. The same problem. It's not fair. It's not right. They're taking money out of the pockets of the people of this county. It shouldn't be allowed. And I didn't give y'all an opportunity to ask me questions last time, but if you have any, I'm happy to answer.
You said that there were 3 reasons why it was not practical. The first thing you said was you need 12 feet and 11 inches for the trucks to get in. The second thing you said was Swanee River Water Management would not let you widen the road. And the third point was what?
If you look at the top of the map that I just handed out to you,
This orange area?
yes, that orange area is not on the access easement. That's on our land. And that's the area that we use to screen people for weapons, glass bottles, to obtain waivers and all of those things. And the road at certain places is only 30 feet wide. So if you take 12 and a half feet plus 20 feet for a driveway, you're past 30 feet. And all you have is ditches. So you can't, it doesn't work. I'd invite the commission out for a site visit. We'd be happy to do that with the entire commission. But that's where we are. Thank you, guys.
Quick response.
Yeah.
So, if the issue, as I understand it, or one of the, as I understand it, the designated lane wouldn't be being sought by the leads if the entire roadway wasn't used as a waiting line, right? So, if the people that were coming to the event actually waited on the Iron Horse Mud Ranch property, then the road wouldn't be backed up for potentially hours and hours with 1 or 2 lanes of big truck traffic. And then you don't need a designated lane because it's not backed up with traffic. And so, it would seem, I think the applicant owns about 530 acres or somewhere in that neighborhood. It would seem that, I mean, if the TSA can form a snake line to process people through for weapons and things of that nature, it would seem that if you got 530 acres, you could probably do a similar type thing, have it on your property, then the road's not backed up. EMS, fire, Leo are not having problems getting to and from, neither of Lee's. Problem solved. And the Lees would need a lane to try to get to, as I understand it, that western point is where, what they have historically used as their actual driveway. They've got several roads in going, it looks like there's a borrow pit with a road going to it, but I don't think that goes to their house, it goes to the borrow pit, so that, yeah, that doesn't do much good. But at any rate, I believe the Iron Horse bought the property knowing this was a pre-existing condition, knowing that this ordinance was in place. They applied under this, ordinance before and obtained the waivers before. And now when there's been a disagreement that rises to the level that it causes this kind of consternation, they'd like you to just change it and do away with it. If they're putting that on you and putting that on the Lees, I don't know that it would be too much to ask them to form a TSA line on their own property. Just a thought.
Right, didn't they sign the easement over to the Iron Horse bunch? I mean, the easement hadn't changed.
Correct.
It didn't have nothing in it about no 20 foot when they signed it.
Correct. They did not. It's basically a wide open ingress and egress easement.
Well, they gave them the right of way for the whole road.
Yeah, well, actually more than that road. I want to say it's 60 feet across. It's just only built out to, my recollection from our last conversation was the widest point was 42 feet. I heard Mr. Bingham say 32 feet. I haven't been down there with a tape measure, but my recollection is it was wide enough for 2 20-foot lanes, but maybe not. But it's 60 foot wide of an actual easement access area. And yes, it was written with very few limitations other than, neither side can block it off or put structures in the middle of it or anything silly like that.
Well, once they signed off on that easement for them to have it, they still got it. There wasn't no way they could come back and change it, horse in the middle of the creek. I mean.
Not without agreement of the parties, although in theory, if you're gonna agree to a wide open access easement, but you know you have a noise ordinance waiver in place, you feel a little more comfortable, agreeing to this over here if you still have the ability to make sure the conduct is good. Would the Lees have signed it, the access easement, if the county ordinance wasn't in place? I don't know, but maybe not. But they knew it was in place, it had been in place, and so, but short answer, yes, it's a fairly expansive access easement.
They let them use that easement all them years without saying a word, and all of a sudden, it's changed. I mean, without any change of wording or any kind of agreement. It was just they just up and came out of the blue and wanted to change the easement right away.
I wouldn't say it was out of the blue. This has been culminating for about 2 years that we've been involved attempting to negotiate because of some problems that admittedly Iron Horse has done a lot of work, or so I've been told, to try to work to correct those things. But that started the process of saying, hey, we'd like to see these types of things and improvements, certain types of improvements so that the leagues can surrender their waiver ability under the ordinance permanently. They don't want to be in the middle of this either. I mean, they just got painted the whole county as extortion. It's like, who wants to be that guy? And so they don't want to be in the middle of it probably any more than you do, probably more than you don't want to be in the middle of it. But the problems that brought them to the table in the first place are saying that yes, we'd love to amend those. And the only way to do that is either your ordinance or the written agreement. And the written agreement, as you saw, the last version of it was redlined all over the place back and forth, and we just didn't get there. Yes.
So what changed 2 years ago for this to all of a sudden be an issue? This had happened really for decades without an issue.
So
what changed 2 years ago for this to all of a sudden be an issue?
well, I can tell you that when Mr. Lee came to my firm, the complaints were that the lead up to an event for anywhere from 3 to 5 days, the trucks would be able to show up early to the event, and it almost became like a tailgate party or pre-party. And they would stack up on the road, not being allowed access to the Iron Horse property. And then, like any good pre-party, it was a party, right? And the parties got loud and a lot of alcohol, and it's all well and good. And then there started to be litter and some defecation on Mr. Lee's property, like stepping off the roadway and things like that, to where he said, okay, something's gotta give here. And that's kind of what brought him to my office. At least, those were his complaints. I don't have any photographs. I didn't go out there and take pictures. I definitely didn't collect any samples.
It's my understanding that Mr. Lee worked for Iron Horse maybe at some point. Did all this start transpiring before or after?
He worked there.
He worked there?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know his dates of employment.
Can somebody here answer that?
That'd be after.
Okay.
And if the question is making your mind wonder, is this a disgruntled employee situation or something like that? All I can say is it's not what's been represented to me by Mr. Lee. But stranger things have also happened. I'm not making a representation one way or the other. I'm just saying the law is the way it's written, and the parties being who they are, and even despite a lot of back and forth negotiation, whether either side wants to say the other was operating in good faith or not, I don't even want to throw those stones, and I don't want to defend them. We just didn't reach an agreement, and now there's not a waiver, and your ordinance has for concerts and mud bogs, the ability for the neighboring landowner to say, I don't want you within 660 feet of my border. And so they would like it changed. We're coming to you with a proposed change that, would hopefully solve this, and then the lease, they'd be giving up their waiver power. And mind you, after 2 years of having an attorney involved, without a dollar being requested or going to them. It's not a money thing as far as I can tell.
With these drawings here, is it as clear to you all as it is to me that the proposal in this ordinance request amendment that you all have requested, is it as clear to you all as it is me that it's not, it really isn't practical for that to happen?
Well, it's a starting point. The ordinance is a starting point. My expectation is if you wanted it to be worked on, you would direct the county attorney to get with both of the other attorneys and start working up one that would actually work. So if there's 12 foot 2 inches needed, or 11.2, or whatever it is, let's call it 12 feet as a minimum width, and Mr. Brigham has said the road width at one point is 32 feet, right? 32?
30, I think.
30 feet. All right, so you got 2 and change. Now, I don't know if the road can't be widened in that point, if it's been like that, and you see it's 47 feet wide in some places, 42 in others. But if it was 12 as your minimum needed, and your road was like 36 feet in width, you're good. And it's over 40 in every place except, I see a 22 on there, but I'm not sure what
I
that
think
is.
that's probably a typo. I think that should be in the 30 range.
32, okay, or it's 30 something. At any rate, we're talking about one bottleneck place with 10 more feet of width, and you can run 3 lanes wide, which gives an ingress and egress for truck traffic in and out, and a dedicated lane for law enforcement, EMS, et cetera, which probably a pretty good safety feature to have in an event with 5,000 people or 10,000. I don't know what the expected turnout is or what it has been in the past. I always hear rumors about how big they are, and which is great for a lot of reasons, but all the more reason to have emergency access. Or in the event there was a really bad thing, open all lanes outgoing, have 3 lanes running out. If there was a catastrophe, mass shooting event or something like that, having an extra lane ready to go that's not all jammed up is not a terrible thing.
Yeah, that'd be the biggest road in town.
What was that? I didn't know.
It's already that big, except for one spot on the road. Well, yeah, okay.
As my understanding, there's not an issue with emergency vehicles being able to come and go. I think the congestion there may be a little congestion when folks are filling the park. I don't think emergency vehicles are the issue.
And I know that a lot of them, and having looked at the application, are actually stationed on site, so they're not having to respond to go there, it's more of an exit thing. And so, you know, ultimately, it's up to you guys, on what you wanna do. If you amend it and remove the waiver requirement, are you also gonna do that for concerts? What about the one that's up in, your district, Ms. Spiegel, or Commissioner Spiegel, that had these concerts going off right next to the door? And it was, let's send to code enforcement, let's enforce our ordinance, they gotta be 660 feet off. Well, does that now go away too? We could have concerts wherever we want, right up to the property line, and you know, have 9-inch nails out there hammering away, which I'm all for if everybody else is too. But this is the thing, outdoor loud events for years, you said, buffer unless your neighbors like the noise.
Shameful, these ordinances are actually coincide with each other, because you got 2 different events, really. You got a business, and then you got just somebody having fun, I guess, so to speak. That's what you wanna do at a concert. It's not really, they're not there just making money. I mean, they may make a little bit of money.
I think our Brooks makes a living on it.
But I can assure you, they're not making enough money to not get up there to work on Monday morning. So, I'm not talking about folks in town, maybe folks out of town.
I'd like to respond to that when he's done.
But I'm just saying, it's 2 different, talking about an event that's been going on for decades, not an issue. And now, all of a sudden, a year and a half ago, we got an issue that we can't have an event that brings $3.3 million according to us. These guys per event.
Well, I'd say, since this ordinance has been in effect, with 2 mud bogs a year, and then when we were running 2 big mud bog events in Taylor County, was it 3 or 4 years, something like that? On the 20 years, Taylor County's run, what, 60 mud bogs into this thing? 40 mud bogs? 40. 40 is a safe number. 40 bogs. But this ordinance in place. And there hasn't been a problem until this one. And the league's been there the whole time. So did the ordinance change? Did the lease change? Did the neighboring landowners change? I don't really want to get into a finger point thing, but it's been working for 20 years with the lease sitting right there.
First of all, with the music festival that was in part of my district, it's in close to an area where there were a lot of residents. I had calls night and day because of the loud music. It is a for-profit festival. They sell tickets. It's obviously not as big as the Mud Bog, but who is to say that it won't grow to be that big one day? I'm sure that They probably have aspirations to have a big event such as, that would be comparable to the Mud Bog. So, and another thing, it's not relevant to me whether Mr. Lee, whether this, whatever happened, was while he was working for them, or if it was after he was working for them. To me, that's not relevant. But we've got to protect the people in my district where that music festival has been going on. So, you know, I want to hear from the public before I say anything else.
I'm happy to have a seat if you don't have any
Okay.
questions for me.
You may have a seat. Okay. We'll hear from you one at a time, 3 minutes, please. Who'll be the first? State your name, please.
Todd Larson with Iron Horse, my branch, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys. I'll try, I've got a few different points that I want to hit on that were mentioned here. The road width. It's not a matter of me going out with an excavator and making a road wider and bringing in more rock. Swanee River Management delegated that the road could only be this size. We can't go wider at all. Technically, if you want to look at this, and I have all of the prints, all of everything from when the Swanee River Management agreed for us to put in the road. Henry is not supposed to have one easement driveway off of that road going on his property. That's supposed to be a swell. That's supposed to be a ditch. Henry, over time, keeps punching more and more gates in. So technically, those aren't supposed to be there. Another point, Henry Lee, Laura Lee, the easement to get onto Iron Horse's property used to go through the Lee's property. Henry and Laura didn't like that, so in 2011, the previous owners of Iron Horse Mud Ranch released Henry out of that easement with a few bucks. In turn, Henry gave an easement for us to have the primary easement on this road to be built. Also, Andy Land LLC did the same thing. Between those two easements, that gave us the access road put through by Swanee River Management. The road was paid for in full by Iron Horse Mud Ranch. The permitting was done, paid in full by Iron Horse Mud Ranch. The road never existed up until that point. At the point that those people signed on for those easements, they knew and agreed that Iron Horse Mud Ranch required that road. Another question that was asked was why couldn't Iron Horse move the spectators, patrons within the park? You realize that this is why that road was built. Because when Iron Horse Mud Ranch first started, the traffic piled up on Highway 19. Multiple accidents, mud all over the road, stop, gridlock, traffic. So to alleviate that, the previous owners of Iron Horse Mud Ranch went through the painstaking process of permitting, paying for a road, so on and so forth. To do all that, to get the patrons off US Highway 19. Sorry. Can I just, quick second?
Go ahead.
That's why the road was built. They knew what they were getting into when they did it. As far as why is this happening now, Henry used to work for us, no longer works for us, and it is in my opinion, a power trip. We have tried to do things legally, even there, again, you can't split it off and give a 20-foot pathway on that road. We don't have the real estate. We have a ton of people here that have a lot of trucks, and that road gets filled up. Do we want them on 19? We've got to have a way to check for guns, glass bottles, everything else. Everyone in this community will tell you Iron Horse Mud Ranch is safer now than it was 3 years ago when I owned it. It used to be chaos. we've made it much better.
You owned it?
I do, sir.
No. You own it now.
You own it now?
Yes, sir. Yes, I own it. I
You own
own it.
Safer now.
My wife, Carrie, and my wife, and I both own it, yes. Thank you. If you got any other questions, I'm here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, y'all. Good evening. My name is Kevin Hart. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. Perry, Florida, Taylor County. I never want to come back here again, man. I hated this place. I went to Iron Horse Mud Ranch. I traveled to I go to all major events. It was terrible. It was dangerous. People were hurt. People were helicoptered out. Taylor County Sheriff's Department was terrible. This was a bad experience for me. I went home. Todd Larson's a friend of mine. Kevin, I'm gonna buy this place. Please come back. I said, man, don't do it, man. Don't buy that place, man. I hate it. He bought that place. I've never seen anyone hurt there. I've seen nothing but kids have a good time. 2,200 kids at a Halloween event. Free candy bags, free presents. This is a family. This isn't a mud bog. Mud bog makes us sound dirty. We're a family, and we go there to have fun. I knew Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee worked there when it was that place, when it was terrible, when people got hurt. He was security there. He was maintenance there. That place was dangerous all night long. 4 o'clock in the morning, kids throwing donuts in campgrounds. That doesn't happen no more. 7 o'clock, we're done. We have families, we have kids. My son was just in here. Mr. Henry has asked for the gates to the front of the property be open so that he can get in and out. He has his own driveway with numerous gates, but he wants those iron gates opened up. Todd works on the road. His wife and those kids got to be in that property by themselves, back there alone. Mr. Henry wants gate open. Why? Mr. Henry wants a security guard at the 3rd gate down. He wants a security guard sitting there to make sure that don't get locked. No problem, Mr. Henry. We'll put a security guard there for you. The security guard was put in place. It's not enough. So here we stand today. Enough's got to be enough. He's just asking for things after things. I'm a trucking company. 12 foot wide, I'm allowed to haul down the road without an escort. 12 foot, that's big. That's very wide. I'm hanging 42 inches off the side of a trailer. He wants 20 foot of a road for what? Emergency access vehicles can get in and out of there. I've never seen so much safety in my life. Fire department presence, police department presence, EMT presence, and a helicopter pad with an exit in and out. Do not let Todd Larson catch you coming up that exit to skip the line because you think you're fancy. Because you are going to be in trouble. You think a policeman's radio is fast. You ought to see this one. There is plenty of access in and out of it. Mr. Henry is nothing but ornery. When he was dismissed from his job at Iron Horse Mud Ranch because he didn't want to do things the way Mr. and Mrs. Larson wanted them done, here we stand. This is nothing more than a power trip by a grumpy old man. He has plenty of access in and out of there. He has plenty of safety access in and out of there and during those events. Like this gentleman said, he signed that easement over. You can't let a man build a house, build a business, and then take it away from him because you're upset with him. That's just not fair. We only want what's right and what's ours. Thank you.
Appreciate y'all. My name's Daniel Thompson. I'm a sergeant mega truck. I live in South Alabama. I come here today, as Mr. Kevin Lawrence said, and Todd, and the attorney, you cannot go to Iron Horse Mud Ranch when it's open, when there is a ranch event, like Kevin said, Mud Bog gives a bad name. The ranch, it wouldn't be open if there was a police, private security, also EMS, fire trucks. They're there. They're there before the place opens. And if this man that owns this property next to it was concerned about your child or your grandchild, he'd let them go through their property to get there. Because if you come to my house and something happens to your child, I'll run the neighbor's gate over to bring you in. If he needs access to his property, you can see it right there. This is the safest place in the country that I know. I just got back from Kildare Hills, North Carolina. I go down south, I go to Texas. I'm actually opening up Patriot Mud Bog in South Alabama. He goes out of his way to make this place safe and safer than it's ever been. And it's self-policed. If somebody drives by here on a side-by-side and they're going fast, tell them to slow their butt down. If they got anything to say about it, just hold on 1 minute. I'll get the man and he'll make a change. I don't know. And anybody here will tell you, we tell each other's kids to slow down, because we don't want the dust and we don't want nobody getting hurt. We were talking about it. I mean, this place, it's not a mud bog. It's quote unquote the Disney World of mud. I mean, this place is safe. When you come there, and that's my opinion, not Disney World, so I'm just saying, 'cause I don't want to get sued for using their name, but I'm just telling you, this place is safe. I bring my 8-year-old granddaughter there. I don't worry about it. When I come, I have to have an area 90 foot wide, 200 yards long. That's 600 feet, because I bring 40 or 50 people. All my family, my sister, my uncles, my cousins, and all their kids. Yeah, I'm older. I got kids that got kids. So we're gonna bring them, we're gonna have a good time, and like everybody said, they've signed the waiver again and again. It just keeps getting more and more and more. Let man do the business. I mean, this is America. My grandfather, Korea, Vietnam, he fought for our freedom. That's what this flag stands for.
Thank you, Joe, for letting me address you. And ladies, my name is Dwayne Smith. I'm out of Jacksonville, Florida. I've been a patron of Iron Horse Mud Ranch for 8-9 years now. As others said, the interesting things that went on in the previous years before the Larson family owned it was really interesting. Seen Life Flight land there 4 times in one night. Have not seen it happen again since they have owned it. I've seen Life Flight here one time, and actually I think they allowed permission for Life Flight to land on the property to pick somebody up off of US 19. I'm one of those guys that come a week early to a mud bog. I take my vacation a couple times a year and I come over here. I come over here and I do camp on that road. I have a Freightliner semi that's got living quarters in it, and I pull 2 mud trucks. And I've got other people with me that pull side-by-sides and stuff like that of mine. I bring 150 people here from Jacksonville. And I'm gonna tell you, we all spend $1,000, $2,000 in y'all's town a piece that weekend. I've camped on that road for night after night, and there has always been access. Mr. Henry, used to talk to Mr. Henry all the time at this far entrance to his property. We always left an opening. He said, man, Dwayne, if you don't leave an opening for my wife, she's gonna kill me. So we always left an opening, and there was always ingress, egress down that road for him and his wife to get in and out. I've seen police cars, emergency vehicles come in there. When there was vehicles side by side, we tighten them up as tight as we can. So there's always been no problem with access to the property. Thank y'all.
I'm Jim Musselwhite. I live in Mr. Newman's district. I've been going to the mud bog with my wife, my daughter, my other daughter for years. My daughter and I are in the middle of building her own truck. She wants to go into the motorsports industry, you know, in the future. But you're letting someone who is a disgruntled ex-employee dictate someone's ability to make money on your property, and that's wrong. Your ordinance is wrong. It's written in wrong language, and it needs to be changed. It needs to be changed tonight. We expect that. There's plenty of people here in support of it. And if you haven't seen already about how wrong it is, then your eyes obviously aren't open. You know, you see how much money spent here. He employs 200 people at every event. 200. That's a lot of money coming to this town for people that need that job. Just think about that. We let a lot of money slide through our hands over one disgruntled ex-employee. Thank you.
Short. Diane Schwab, I live at 103 Elizabeth Lane here, Perry. I am Combat Marine Outdoors event coordinator. I don't know if y'all know what that is. But we have a nonprofit foundation in Major County, and we bring in 8 wounded warriors each year in the spring, and they each bring a child. And we treat them to a week of hunting and fishing here in Taylor County to help rehabilitate the relationships between the warriors and their children after years of combat and deployment. They have no relationship with their I'm very passionate about this, so I'm sorry. They have no relationship with their fathers after years of being gone, and they come here, we fly them in, and are here for a week, and, we also show them while they're here what we have to offer here in Taylor County. We always do an industry on a Wednesday, and that's kind of our tour Taylor County Day. And for the last couple of years, we have been out to Iron Horse Mud Ranch. I will be first in saying that when my son, who's a big mud bogger, came and said, "Mom, will we please consider taking the Warriors out to Iron Horse?" And I said, "Absolutely not. We are not going there." And he said, "Please, will you think about it?" I said, "I'll think about it." So I thought about it for a year. Quickly, I met Todd, he was introduced to me at Horse Festival. He asked me to come out to Iron Horse. I had never been out there. And he put me in his truck and rode me around that place. And I just want to tell you, if you have not been out there, I would challenge each and every one of you to take the time and take a personal tour out there. It's very nice. It is set up so nice for families, a beach area. There's playgrounds for children. Each one of them are fenced in. We brought our Warriors out there. They were honored with the ROTC came out and they did the opening. It happened to be the year that it was on the event. And they did an opening, and our Warriors with that. We have a picnic lunch out there. They provide side-by-side. They do four-wheelers. And I would just tell you that it is an awesome day for those Warriors to spend one-on-one time with their children out there. They just love being able to do that. I've seen it change so many hearts, and I'm thankful to Iron Horse that they let us come out there and open it up. Even this year, that all this is going on, we were able to go out there and open it up for us privately to be able to go out there. And it was wonderful to see such a change in these children and these Warriors' lives. And I just ask that you please consider, what's really going on here, and take a look for yourselves, and think about what the public wants, and what's really going on here deeply, and I really appreciate what they have done for us. I just wanted you to know, that it's truly changed my heart about it, and they're continuing to make it better and better out there, and it is truly safe, I will say. For somebody that said they were not going, it really is. Thank you.
I'm Chad Schwab, I'm Davis Hudson. We're in District 4, and I appreciate the opportunity. I just want to piggyback on what she said about Combat Marine Outdoors and what Todd and Carrie have done for those families. It has changed their lives. And if you don't believe that, you just come to our end of the year or end of the week program at the Elks Club, and you'll see what they talk about, and you'll see what they love. They love hunting and fishing with their kids, but they love that day out there that the Larsons provided for them. I also want to challenge each and every one of you to do something. Eagle, you said something earlier that was important. You need to check what your constituents want in this matter. Because I truly believe if each and every one of you check with your constituents, the majority would say, we need to amend this easement thing that they're trying to do and give these people access to their property to do what they need to do on their property, to provide good, wholesome family business. It's not about, to me, it's not about the money. Money's not that important to me. What's important to me is what I've seen these people do with families. That's what's important. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of you. I'd like to tell you that Taylor County used to be a place that I would drive to. I would not stop unless it was at Rockies to get fuel, and I would keep going. For the past 2 years, Taylor County has been the destination for the good, clean, fun, the people that I have met, and you all talked about family. The people that I have met at Iron Horse have become more than huge family to me. They get involved in your lives when there's good. They get involved in your lives when there's bad. The support system is just incredible. And a couple times a year, that we all come together, it was good, clean, fun, laughter, and what you said. I invite you all to come out and see it. I never would have believed it. I was a person that went on cruises. I was a person that went anywhere go to a mud bog. I never wanna go anywhere else, but please just consider what you're doing, and the money. There's just two of us. I spend over $1,000 each time we come in your county. I could do that at home, but the nearest grocery store is an hour away from my home anyway, so why not just move it here? Please just consider that.
What did you say your name was and where you're from?
My name is Kathy Johnson, I'm from Gulf, Florida. Yes.
Well, I'm Chris Eric, I'm actually born here, right around the corner. I live in Swanee County now. So I started mud logging back, if any of y'all are familiar, back in Kelly Grade. I started logging in Kelly Grade back in the day. Kelly Grade was a good place here. That was old Beach Road. Then John and I live in a mud bog, which is called Pudding Creek. Y'all are familiar with no mud bog and nothing like that. Okay? They promoted a company called Trucks Gone Wild, which promotes nudity, partying, alcoholism, everything about it. Before John bought it, that owner promoted it too, because it brings revenue, brings crowds, brings money. As a business, that's how they run it, to bring revenue to make a living. As soon as Todd bought it, that was the first thing he eliminated from his park, because it promoted things he did not want. He wanted family mortgage. He did not want that. That was the first thing. I personally was at Kelly Grade many times when I watched lady get her neck broke, air fly. I witnessed all this. I witnessed the death at Iron Horse before Todd was there. I've been bogging since I was 12 years old. I spend at least $300,000 a year to mud bog. That's what it cost me to get it there with semi trucks. The right of way. Todd stopped me one day. Says, Chris, you gotta back your semi up. I come in with a 53-foot trailer, semi loaded down. He stopped me and asked me to back it up for that man's right of way, which was the fourth exit. I didn't understand it, but now, at that time I did, because he had to explain to me. I have offered Todd to come in, because I own a site prep construction company also. I've offered to clear right of ways. But me knowing what's going on, water management, you can't clear that. There's a law base here, okay? I deal with water management every day of my life. You can't push that issue, and you're not gonna get your way with them. Point blank. My big thing is if he wants to snake a TA lane coming in there, I'd love for this man to get in my semi and drive 80 foot and snake it around. I'd love for him to. Second of all, who paid for this road? If I ain't misunderstanding, it's around $375,000 to $500,000 invested for a road to go into a park in your county. If anything, this should be run as a business in y'all's county, not what somebody likes or don't like or agree with or Christian based. It has nothing to do with that. It's the fact that these people are trying to do something good for y'all's community, and you let one person shove it out.
Anyone else?
We'll talk real quick. My name's Justin Layton. I'm from Brantford, Florida, right up the road. I quit coming to Perry. I quit coming to Iron Horse Mud Bog. I have young kids. I didn't want them around that stuff. I despise it. I still do. The Larsons bought it. They changed it. They changed it completely. And it's not just me that thinks that. After this happened, I started an online petition, and I've got over 3,000 signatures on that petition, stating the same thing. They love this place. We love this place. I spend tons of money to come over here with my trucks, like all these people do, and we appreciate your town. We respect y'all. We respect everything in the town. We would just like the opportunity to continue what we enjoy to do as a family. I've got a 3 and a 7-year-old sitting in the hallway, and they were more eager to come to this than me. And, you know, they love the park. They love to go out there and see the minions and the beach and just enjoy time together. That's our vacation. It's not very far, it's less than an hour to home, but that's how we get away from home. And, I ask that y'all push forward with this and give us the opportunity to continue enjoying y'all's town and enjoying this park. Thank you.
Anyone else?
There may be someone in the hall.
Okay. Got one on top, in the hall. Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are y'all doing tonight? I'm Chuck Smith. I'm from Valdosta, Georgia, so don't be too rough on me. I was out there in the hallway. I just came here with my 2 sons. They're grown men now. Mr. Larson's probably not gonna remember this. I met him in Missouri. And I met him because he was putting on a program for the children. Now, we have the big trucks, we mud bog, we've done it as a family since my kids were 6 and 7 years old. Now they're 27 and 21. We go to Missouri, we go to Texas, we go to Georgia, we go to South Carolina, Louisiana, you name it. Y'all have the gem of gems. Y'all only knew how people talked about the Larson's family and what they built here in Taylor County. Now, I live in Clydeville. It's not a long ride for us at all. We love coming down here. We load our trucks up, work on them for weeks, come down here, go to Walmart, buy a bunch of groceries, and go out there. I only wish my children were 6 and 7 again, so we could enjoy the park the way it is, because some of these parks are a challenge. But I remember out there in Missouri, his main focus was for the children, for the classes that were coming out there. He fed all the drivers that brought their trucks. He's not in it for the money, even though it's a large economical impact to this community. That's great, that's icing on the cake, but if y'all could just see what it does to families. My boys, they've stayed out of jail, stayed out of prison, it's because it's been a family story. In the Mudd family, you just don't know the different economical, social divisions, colors. Nobody sees none of that. You break down, there's somebody there to help you. That's all the Larsons wants to do, is provide this place. And somebody said the Disney World of Mudd, that you got better than that. And y'all should be very proud of having this. And, you know, this is a thorn in everybody's side because we want this event. And I wanted the event because there's a bunch of little children out in that hallway. And they want it too. They want to go to the beach. They want to play on the playground equipment. They want to see the big trucks. So I just wish that y'all could all get on the same page and help this move forward for the Larson's family in Taylor County. Thank you.
Mr. Chairperson, we have one caller, who wishes to speak.
Okay. One caller?
It's, 5291. 8291, I'm sorry.
8291, you may speak now, please.
Hi, my name is Vince Fernandez. I live in Odessa, Florida. I'm an adjacent property owner. I just want to point out some facts that nobody mentioned. There are more than just the Larsons that have a deed of interest in that easement. The first 90 feet, the first 60 feet of the quarter mile belongs to 11 other, is deeded to 11 other property owners. The gate that they want to close is not on their property. And the whole issue arose because of parking and camping on the road in the middle of the night. And by definition, that road is for ingress and egress, not for parking, and that's where the problem is. Or camping. aren't willing to compromise any more than anybody else, so that's where we're at. And that's really all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Any more calls? That's all. Okay. Newman?
Well, it seems like we're not at the same crossroads. I'd love to see this situation resolved so that this event can take place. I certainly understand where the Larsons are at, I believe. I've spoken with most of them, and, I've also spoken with, Mr. Lee. So, it doesn't appear to me, listening to both these attorneys, that there's been any headway made whatsoever, other than more time being spent and more, let's say, frustration mounting. So, I'm interested to understand, Mr. Bishop, our ordinance says that we have to have those waivers signed, isn't that correct?
Yes.
I understand, and we don't have all those waivers, is that right?
That is correct.
How many people, how many families holding out?
So we did not receive a waiver from the Lees. We did receive an updated waiver from, Diane Hathcock for James Ellison, that was effective through and including 12/31/2025.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Mr. Bishop, Mr. Bigum made a statement, in the beginning, and he said that our ordinance was wrong. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, of course, this is the first I've heard that. I haven't spoken with the attorney for the Larsons. I asked when the Larsons first came up to have their attorney contact me, and I haven't gotten anything from anybody.
I'd be happy to speak with you.
Well, also, these two cases are very ancient. And of course, I would have to study them and also shepherdize them and find out whether in fact, they're still good law. I don't know that, as a practical matter. And where we're at, is that we have an ordinance that's been in effect since 2004. Initially, it was in 2002, then it was amended in 2004. And it worked very well as far as the waivers that people sign and the checks and balances and so forth. So at this particular point in time, it's the law in Taylor County.
It works until Mr. Lee wasn't employed in our office anymore.
Well, I don't know about that.
I do.
That's the truth, you just were told.
I was asked a question, and I'm answering it to the best of my ability, sir. So, where you're at is, you've got two competing sides, throwing y'all and this board right in the middle of it. So, you've got an ordinance, the ordinance, you read all the time of ordinances being overturned by courts. I don't know whether this one, I've been a lawyer for a long time. Generally speaking, when somebody tells me they're gonna sue my client, I say, be my guest. Bring it on. I don't want that to happen in this particular case, because either way y'all go, you're probably gonna end up defending yourselves some way, in court. Only one side's told us they were gonna take us to court, and that's the Larsons, and they have that absolute right to do that. Y'all have the absolute right to, you can't amend the ordinance tonight. We cannot do it.
Why not?
It's under Florida law, sir. We have to have it.
I don't know why, I'll ask him why.
Well, if you'll let me tell you, I will.
You said under Florida law, okay.
I'm smiling at you, okay? Let me just tell
I
you.
don't really care about you smiling at me.
I
I just don't know why. I mean, everybody's here
Excuse me,
for an amendment.
Mr. Bishop has the floor.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Mr. Bishop?
Under Florida law, to amend the ordinance, we have to pass an amended ordinance. We have to advertise it in the paper, and then we have to have a time to have a public hearing on it. That's not been advertised. So that's why it can't be amended tonight. We've got two lawyers here that'll agree with me. If they don't agree with me, then we'll have a good argument. It's a practical matter, y'all. But that's the law. The only time that we can pass an ordinance without an ordinance is an emergency, like for the hurricane or something like that. So at this point, you can't amend the ordinance tonight.
You have some more questions?
I had that one question, and I know, I understand that we cannot do anything with the ordinance, and we're here tonight. What's on the agenda is to approve the application, but the application is not complete. So, I've listened to everybody on both sides. And, some of you have really touched my heart with some of the things that you've said. About the people that enjoy coming here and what it's meant to a lot of people to be here. And I do think from everything that I've heard that it's a safe place now, that it's a family place now, that it brings revenue into Taylor County. Lord only knows we need that. It helps a lot of people. But it seems like I just can't understand why we're in the middle of this. I mean, I understand, but it seems like this is a civil matter to me. We've had an ordinance that's worked, and it's worked fine. Something happened. I've heard accusations of what happened.
Quit tape people.
But is it really, Mr. Bishop, are we to get in the middle of this and try to figure it out for them?
Well, here's where y'all are at. Number one, they're here to ask you to approve their application, which doesn't have a check mark. There's one check mark missing, for lack of a better term. Okay. If you don't do that, if you say, well, we're not going to approve your application tonight because it's not complete, y'all can instruct your attorney to amend the ordinance if you want to do that. Now, I didn't get your amendment until just a few minutes ago, and I have a question about it. Is you said that it would apply to the whole county, and the way it's worded, I don't know that it could apply to the whole county because it looks like it's gone just toward the Larson's property and the Iron Horse Mud Bog. I just briefly looked at it, so that would be a problem. But if you tell me to amend the ordinance, then, like I was telling this gentleman right here, we would prepare an amendment and then advertise it and have a hearing on it to determine whether, and when we have a hearing on it, we provide that you have public input where people get up, just like you did tonight, and say, I'm for it or against it, so forth. And that's the beauty of America. We're in Americana right now. The other thing is, or you could just say, I'm sorry, we're not gonna do your application, we're not gonna attempt to amend the ordinance. Believe me, if you attempt to amend the ordinance, you're gonna have pro and con people coming on that. You know that. You'll have people who will be for the amendment, and you may have people that are against the amendment. And so then that's the decision that y'all would have to make at that time. And of course, I think their next mud box in October, am I not correct? So
Yes,
you've got,
it's scheduled for October, and I'd just say that I've spoken with my client, and if the board instructs their attorney to amend the ordinance and to work with the parties, we will work with the county attorney and the other side to come to a reasonable accommodation without having to try to resort to the court system, which we really do not want to do.
But we'd have to amend the ordinance.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that I ask Mr. Bishop to please work with these two attorneys and let's see if we can resolve the situation.
Amending the ordinance.
If that's what it takes, I would be glad to entertain what we can work out. But I would like that to be agreeable to all parties.
May I ask a question, just so that we're all on the same page, if you make that motion and it gets a second and a vote? May I approach the podium, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, I heard one gentleman, he stepped out right after he spoke, but he said, we've been doing this for years and making sure there's access, we can squeeze in 2 lanes and allow people by. And we heard another gentleman, semi-truck driver.
What do you need to
There
know?
were several of them anyway that said, I didn't know that there was a driveway there and I was told to back up and things like that. And so the draft that I had prepared, I had written in 20 feet because I don't know how wide the road is, but it sounds as if it was.
20 foot's half of a road,
That's
a
right.
normal road.
Thank you.
So if, go ahead.
So if the amendment that we're working towards said a single lane of travel, that way, depending on the conditions of the roads, the parties can attempt to work that out, where you're not saying 20 feet measured with a ruler, because it sounds like, according to the gentleman that said he's been coming here for a long, long time, that's a doable thing on that road. If it's a doable thing on that road,
There's 2 lanes in and 1 lane out.
always, and that's the beauty about it, if our proposed amendment says, anybody, not just Mr. Lee, but the way it's written is to say, if there's a non-public roadway that's access to the event, the non-contiguous, you don't have to get a waiver for the landowners that are contiguous to the non-public roadway, so long as you would provide, it's a 20 now, single.
8 feet. That's the width of the car.
Single lane of travel, I think if we put it, there's a gentleman that said, I think you were the one that told us it'd been squeezing together. Yeah, I've seen for years, 2 people parked side by side, and there's always been a lane in and out of there.
Always.
There's
Never.
never.
My motion would be that a county attorney would work with the counselors to come to an agreement. If it comes down to an amendment so that the park owners or the event sponsors or the persons that are seeking the permit and the landowners, however that language needs to read, but I believe that would be acceptable.
So what you're saying is, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that, you're making a motion for me to work with these 2 gentlemen here.
Yes, sir.
And hopefully come to some kind of agreement and if not, to work on an amendment. So it's kind of a do one or the other. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Commissioner Newman? Okay, all right. That's your motion.
That's the motion.
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Chairperson, I'm so sorry, before you vote, there's one more person that would like to speak before you close the public hearing. I'm sorry. If you want to recognize that person.
Go ahead. Yeah. What's the
On
number?
the phone, it is number, what is it?
2075.
2075.
2075, you may speak now.
Hello, gentlemen. My name is Albert Avila. I am one of those people that have been affected by iron ore mud ranch in a positive way. I'm actually surprised that we have to have this discussion in which a neighbor gets to extort somebody. And in reality, you are offending everybody in that place. Okay, you're stifling business to your own community, to your own constituents. If you actually are even considering that because small friends and friends of friends will continue to satisfy what the people want, by ignoring the people that have put hard work to a community, to a park, and to families all over and across the United States. Okay? This will make national news. It has to. But the offense to the growth it's insulting, to be honest with you. I'm a former Marine, okay? And I personally find this offensive. Okay, you guys, better start reevaluating what is happening here. I'll yield.
Thank you. Okay.
Now, you know, I hear what we're saying on motion to just involve our attorney to go and join the other two attorneys to work this out. But it's obvious that the two attorneys today have not been able to work this out, being denied at the end of the discussion. So, at the end of the day, somebody's still gonna end up in court. It's still gonna end up in a suit. If the attorneys can truly work this out, outside of the court system, judicial system is where it should have already been prior to getting here, because none of us are attorneys, or none of us are judges. That if you guys could legitimately work this out, there's no need for a waiver within this ordinance. So I would make a motion to amend the ordinance, to do away with the waiver, and you guys go work it out as you say you can do.
I'll second that motion.
Whoa,
Yeah.
The
There's
motion
a
on
on the floor. There's a motion on the floor.
Okay. His motion is on the floor.
Right.
Do you amend that motion?
I believe we can accomplish the task at hand if our attorney would work through these, two counselors and facilitate the process. So I'd like to have a vote on the motion.
Or you want to second it? Anybody want to second?
I second it, but, I'm gonna withdraw my second.
What gets me out of the whole thing, we've had a lot of people come here for this thing, we have not had one person. People's called me all morning long for this thing, nobody has called me against that mud logging. So many people got so much more respect for Todd's operation down there than what they've had in the past. People are really for this thing. And I listen to the people, I've asked a lot of people and they tell me a thing, and it helps you make a decision. We need, like you said, we need to go ahead, do this thing in the right direction. If somebody's gonna go in litigation over it anyway, it might as well be for the better of the Taylor County people that want this thing, and they want to get it.
Okay. Your motion stands. So we got, how many motions on the floor? Two motions? One.
Like a second.
Okay, did we get a second?
No, the second one will go, sorry.
Second one was Strong. Do we have a second?
I'll second this motion.
So exactly what is that motion?
We're back to this motion right here.
I wanna know, no, that one died. So could you tell me what Mr. English's motion is, Mr. Clerk?
Yeah, motion to amend the ordinance to remove the waiver requirement.
And the,
Can't do that.
Yeah, the attorney saying we can't do those things.
Okay, I'm sorry, the motion was to ask the county attorney to prepare
There you go.
the amended ordinance to remove the waiver requirement.
Okay, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So that's really gonna move to another public hearing. Is that what this action is gonna set in motion? So if we're taking away, this option from adjacent landowners, then they're not gonna have any ability to work with these event holders. Is that what I understand? That's really what this motion would do. If this proceeds, the action would take away the waiver, stipulation, which really would take away, any kind of option that neighbors would have in agreeing with these events.
Correct.
That are seeking permits.
Correct. That's what his motion is.
Takes away the buffer.
there's still got.
But they would still have to come here and
Have
have all the neighbors disagree at once instead of just one.
There's still guidelines in the ordinance that the Larsons would have to meet.
Correct. And we would still have to come here and get your approval.
But that takes away the adjacent landowner's option.
Take away some of it anyway.
Well, they could,
You start with, I always thought an ordinance meant, it behooves the landowners to, the one that holding a special event to get these papers signed and whatever, and bring them to us. You know, the insurance and the safety and all of that, that's his job. And when he don't do that, then somebody got a problem, and it's the one that's holding the event problem. Now, if there is something else, if there's underlying figures or underlying problem with that, because of a person honestly doing what he need to do, then you could shut the largest thing down in Perry or in Taylor County. Is that right or is that wrong? Now, I know what I've heard them say, you know, what, it has worked 25 years, we shouldn't change it. Well, I don't know whether that's true or not. You know, you change ownership. When you change ownership, things change. I worked for one company for 25 years, and best company in the world. The last 3, I don't know what it looked like. And I did work for the second company, but it wasn't like the first company. There is a difference, and the things will change. Look like we need to change too.
Amen.
Amen, thank you.
You know, and I'm not for, I don't know Mr. Lawson, first time I've ever seen him. Mr. Henry Lee, I don't know whether I've ever seen him or not. But sitting up here hearing what I've been hearing tonight, we need to do something, do the best we can for our people.
Thank you.
Now, let me ask you this. Look like it's a personal vendetta to me. Look like that's what I'm hearing, and I don't know how true that is. Maybe Mr. Lee ain't here to defend himself. I don't know.
He's right here through council. And respectfully, Mr. Chairman, funny, so your present ordinance doesn't allow somebody to shut an event down. It's just the county recognizing when you apply for a permit for a loud outdoor event, you're going to give your neighbors a buffer. Unless they waive the buffer. So the question is, are you moving to amend the ordinance to take away the neighbor's right to insist on a buffer? That's the question. Now, this one's a little bit different because the access road is in the buffer zone. I acknowledge that there's a difference versus just having a loud event right up to your property border. There's the extra added element of ingress and egress here, which is why this draft amendment is addressing a lane of ingress and egress. And should that be there, you don't have to get the waiver from that neighbor. But understand, if you take away landowners' rights to say, I still want my buffer, my noise buffer from a loud event, you're doing that for every event in the county from here forward. And just, I would encourage you to consider the consequences of that when it lands on the doorsteps of other people, closer to home people, closer to your neighborhood.
Who are you going to put? I was under the impression it was only 20 feet we was talking about. I don't think we was trying to take the whole ball of wax from anybody. And I did hear we need to be able to leave it so that the emergency.
Which we do.
Is that what I'm hearing now? Is that all you was asking for emergency wagon and police to be able to come in and out when they get ready?
We have that is in place now, and Henry Lee has always been able to use that same pathway that EMTs use. But he chooses to request from everyone that we give him 20 feet is 2/3 of a road for his own personal use. We already have, and he has used the EMT's entrance and exit all the way up until this event.
Henry Lee didn't request 20 feet. You can ask Mr. Bigham. I've told Mr. Bigham, I put that as a plug-in number. I don't know what the exact numbers or measurements are. I put that as a plug-in because I didn't know what the right number was. And that was in the process of negotiation. So that's why I said tonight, single width, if they're already doing it, single width, and the Lees, because they're contiguous to the non-public roadway, no longer, you don't have to get away from them. That's it.
So maybe the answer is that we take ingress and egress, traffic and parking out of the definition of event that requires a buffer. The buffer is required for mud bogging and music, like concerts. We take that out of the purview of the buffer, We say you make sure you've got one lane of ingress and egress of access for EMTs and property owners who have a right to use the road to access their properties. Maybe that's the answer.
And that's where we're going on, that's what we're going for too. And if we can get to that middle ground, then yeah,
So you just said you were Mr. Lee tonight, right? So you can sign the waiver for him? I'm sure Todd will tell you when you get him down.
I'll accept that.
Yeah.
We were making progress, sir. Thank you. And so the only other issue would be that north 660 that abuts Mr. Lee's, but if he's got the roadway, he doesn't care about that north.
There's no mud bogging that goes on there, that's just.
Well, whatever event
Yeah.
activity, he doesn't care about that, it's just the road, and if we
So-
fix it like this, he's out of the
If we
whole
limit-
game with you guys.
If we limit the buffer to only applying to mud bogging or concerts or whatever else, that might do it.
So that being said, the waiver doesn't have to be null and void, done away with.
Right.
If you can come to terms.
We can make it for that access issue that would work on this one, but also if there are similarly situated access roads for other big events somewhere.
Which is, I believe, what my original motion.
If that's what your motion was, yes.
I would reiterate the motion, and not to do away with the buffer area and the waiver requirement. So, if you want to withdraw that, and the second, I'll make my motion again to give that direction. I believe we can come to terms, folks.
We've thought so,
And
but
that's really what I would love to see, is both of these neighbors be able to agree, so there's not a hostage situation. But that the event can go on, that the good, will continue, and that there wouldn't be all of this, rhetoric and division. That's what I like to do, and that's why I made the motion the way I did this year.
Okay.
Okay. I want to state for the record that I would like to see these events continued in Taylor County. I don't want them to go away. I think it's a good thing. We try to conduct our meetings in a civil manner. And I don't like to sit up here and hear people call names. And that's happened tonight. I don't like that. I don't like to be threatened, because usually that gets you nowhere. We need to try to resolve this issue without the threats of a lawsuit and calling people names and degrading people and anything else that goes with that. I don't think that it would hurt anything to give it one more try. And instead of a 20-foot road, see if you can come to some kind of agreement. You're not gonna get exactly what you want, perhaps. And Mr. Lee may not get exactly what he wants. But y'all are all adults and you all have a vested interest in this. And I think that you should be able to come to terms, give a little bit, take a little bit on both sides. So I think that we should give it another try. Let's don't take it for months, because time is of the essence. I know you have an event and you got to know right away. So we need to put a time limit on, when we need to get back. If we need to call a special meeting, if we can't wait till the next meeting, we can do that too.
Or if you had,
Could I just
15,
say,
30 days, how many days?
This isn't gonna work.
yeah, can I just take 1 second? I wanna show you just
Go ahead.
something quick. On this map, we'll say Mr. Henry is discussing about wanting a 10-foot driveway to get egress to his house. That's where his concern is at. On this map, pardon me just for a second, when you come in, that first dot, that first red dot is by his old gun store. Henry Lee has his own, right there, that's the entrance, his own 10-foot, his own road going all the way, just the opposite side of the gate, going, if you go to Iron Horse and go through that gate, directly to the right is a driveway that Henry Lee used for 20 years, that goes all the way to his house, unimpeded by anything
that we would need. I'm asking for 8 days a year. 8 days that we can put on an event and we can do wonderful things for this county. And he requires, wants a wish list of 20 feet of my road that Iron Horse paid for and built. When he has 10 feet. He has an entire road on his own property that he can use at will. I just want you to understand that. It's not like, even if we took the entire road, he still has entrance and exit to Highway 19 with no impedance at all on his own property. He just chooses to make this an issue when he has his own road. Keep that in mind. I mean, this is all supposedly about that one road, and we would be keeping safety personnel from reaching his house, or his wife can't get out to the road. Keep in mind, he has an entire road on his property to use. He doesn't have to even use that road.
Evidently, he must not think so. There's two sides to this
Correct,
point.
correct. I just want you to be aware that there is a road.
And said, this is not gonna work.
It's not.
What I'm trying to, wait a minute, just a second, okay? When we're trying to put y'all in a position where you try to work it out, you may have to give a little, he may have to give a little to work this out. Nobody wants to go to court over this. That's ridiculous to have, that it's got to this point. We all want that, we all want the event. You know, we're not saying we don't want the event. Y'all need to work it out, and all of y'all are just refusing to do what it takes. And I talked to Mr. Lee a while back, and he said, I'm willing to negotiate. And so why can't we give it one more try? Unless you're dead set that it's not gonna work, then you're gonna back us up in a corner. Or you're
Sure,
gonna
it's
back
not that
somebody
I'm
up in a
dead
corner.
set, it's that what I've seen with my own 2 eyes and with my own hard work and trying to work with Mr. Curtis, it takes 2 people to settle. And every time we get there, when we offer everything Mr. Lee wants, he pulls the rug out from under it. It's because he doesn't want to settle. And that's why I'm saying it's not gonna work. And that's why we've got to have a resolution of this board requesting the county attorney to amend the ordinance, or else we have to pursue other options, because this will not work.
Well, why do you wanna sue us? Why don't these?
There's no
people sue
basis,
each other? How does
there's
that
no basis
put
for us to
into
sue each other.
When we've got something in place that's worked for 20 years.
It's a defective
Well,
ordinance.
will Henry Lee be open to trying to work with them one more time? They're saying he won't. Do you know?
All I know is I was sitting here and told he's good with this. The 20 was my plug-in, okay, not his, but as long as there was a single access lane, this right here. I know that I've been told that. Now I'm putting it on the record for God and everybody. Single lane and a permanently, and the change in the ordinance where there's a single lane for EMS and the contiguous landowner, and no more waiver ever. I'm putting that on the record on his behalf. He's on board with it. And if he comes in here and raises, you know what, then call him a liar to his face. But I'm putting it out there to you because I was directed to put that right there.
You're willing to work with the county attorney to send that to his house before that road?
Always, always. We work well together, as do Mr. Bingham and I.
We did.
We work well together as well.
Yeah,
We are, as long as we're working with the county attorney at this board's direction, we're good to go.
Okay, so if we said that under the guidance of the time frame by the next board meeting, the 22nd, is that enough time, gentlemen?
22nd would be fine.
Bishop?
Of June.
Yes.
Speed is of the essence because we have in front of an event.
So that'd be a first reading on the 22nd. So that means that gives us this week and next week to get a draft to Mr. Bishop, actually this week to get a draft to with Mr. Bishop, so that it can go and be advertised for the first reading. How much advance notice on that?
We only have 1 reading, so a draft ordinance would be brought to the board. We would need it by agenda deadline, which is the Wednesday prior to the meeting, 10 o'clock. And then the draft ordinance would come to the board and request to advertise. And then it would have to be advertised, and then public hearing and approval or disapproval at that point. Is
So if you can get me
correct?
out of court in Leon County on Thursday, I'll come to your office, we'll hash this out.
I doubt I can, but.
I've tried to say this 3 times and I've been interrupted. I've got a medical procedure Wednesday. I don't know, this Wednesday, I don't know how it's gonna keep me out, but I can work from home, you know, as a practical matter. But I just want you to be advised that I will do my best, but if I'm hurting, I might not be able to do it. You understand what I'm saying? But y'all know me, I do work fast, but I'm gonna rely upon you two young men to help me to do an amendment. And I'm not gonna say redo this whole ordinance, I'm just saying an amendment, okay? That really takes care of Mr. Lee and y'all, and Mr. Larson. Y'all follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Is that sufficient for you guys
I agree.
to not amend the ordinance to do away with the waiver? Because, I mean, this is where I'm at. You attorneys have been working on this for I don't know how long. And we have a judicial system that takes care of these type of matters. And that's where I'm ready for y'all to take it and go fix it. And go fix the problem versus coming to us. Because as long as the waiver still stands, next year, 2 years from now, you're gonna be coming back here again, mother may I.
Correct.
And that's, I
I don't
want
have,
out,
we don't want
I
that.
want out of it.
We don't want it either, and I think what we're hearing is that Mr. Lee is happy to be out of it too, if he can have his guaranteed access, and I think we can accomplish that through an ordinance.
Y'all feel like y'all can accomplish that?
But
Through an ordinance amendment at the direction of this county commission.
Working with the county attorney.
Working with the county attorney.
Yeah, I get a motion to that.
Wait, we
We gotta deal with this one forward.
We got a motion and a
Okay.
second now.
I'll withdraw the motion. Okay.
My motion. And you guys go amend the ordinance to where it works. In your wording, a lifetime waiver, we don't have to worry about the waiver anymore. And everybody move on.
There's a second, Mr. Moody.
I'll withdraw mine under the same circumstances.
I'll restate my motion, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Bishop.
I will say, if it comes back up here again, that motion's gonna go back, I'm gonna put that one back on the table.
And I'll put the second back on the table because now, it's been a long time coming, and I have had nobody but one person, and that was Mr. Lee, that was against this whole thing. Everybody else that I've talked to has been for the mud volume, not against it. So, there's one compared to a bunch of other places that's for this thing, so I feel the same way.
Go ahead.
Mr. Bishop, in terms of the music festivals, how would this affect the music festivals?
As I understood it, this is gonna be an amendment to the ordinance that only affects Mr. Lee.
Well, to the mud bogging. So not music.
Section, not the concert section.
Not the concert section.
Okay.
When it comes to access roads.
That's the only way I drafted it up. I assume you guys don't wanna bite out 2 whole sections in one day. But if we can work the kinks out in the mud bog one, then it may easily transfer over since the 2 chapters are mirror images.
So
If you
are
wanted
in
to.
agreement with what's going on?
Absolutely. I think Mr. Bigham and I, with Mr. Bishop's help and using him almost as an intermediary, it sounds like tonight we're this close from reaching an ordinance amendment. We tweak the language and then we hopefully have Mr. Bishop come back to you with a draft ready for first reading or reading, public hearing, passage. And you never have to talk to Mr. Lee again about a waiver, anything like that. Just like, I never. Don't take up my whole road. I got mud trucks coming through.
I want to say one more thing, appreciate it. I have been out to the mud bog, not the event, but I've been out there on the property. I rode every bit of it. And there is a road that Mr. Lee has right across that fence right there that starts at the highway and goes all the way to his house, goes by the pond that he's digging out there, and goes all the way to his house. And all access to all this property. Then there's a fence, and then there's this main road that goes into Ironwood. And I want everybody to understand, he does have access if they had the whole road blocked out there on the Iron Horse, in the Iron Horse Gate, he still got access to his property. I just want that to be on the record as absolutely true. Now, I mean, I don't know if y'all all rode it out there, but I looked at every inch of it, and there is access. And somebody keeps saying there ain't no access, but there is access there. I mean, I rode it myself in my truck, so. I mean, and he owns that property inside that fence, so.
We do have a motion in second.
Wait, the motion is to have the county attorney work with the Larson and the Lee's council to draft an ordinance amendment. Right?
That pertains to mud
Mud
bonds.
I didn't hear the second on that.
Yeah.
It's not been seconded. I
It hasn't been second?
No.
Do I hear a second?
For his ordinance,
Yes.
and he wants, I'll say that.
Okay, move to second. Ready to vote? Aye? Okay. That's it.
Thank you. Quick thing tonight, guys, quick thing.
Anything, I scribbled that out. You heard it, okay, you can have that. Yeah, I am wonderful.
I'll do that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Commissioner. No, this is a trailer. Back to where the house is not. Right, it goes along and it's off. I've got to go to your area.
Yeah, take three.
It'd be good to have a conference if they're available. But initial talk. And I'm sorry, I never received a conversation by now.
Commissioner Ing, you know what, you're asking the question, why did you go to court first? We see this in court all the time. You get halfway through a hearing and the judge gives a little nudge, hey, I'm leaning this way, now you'll go out in the hall and fix it. Once everybody kind of sees what the judge is doing, they'll get together and fix it.
You don't need to wait.
Same thing, road commission is going, well, you're already allowing access way in and out, and what's the harm in putting that in ordinance now that everybody sees what's cleaner? Everybody gets there, so there is benefit.
No, I appreciate it.
He's always had it.
Operation.
Excuse me?
You rode out there, you know exactly well across that fence, he's got it on ready.
I do, I'm doing my job. He also owns the land that this road is on. He owns it.
Well, I've already got two on.
The nudge that you guys gave just now closes the gap. That's what I was just telling, like, when we go to court, we get halfway through a hearing and the judge says, y'all step out and go back. I'm leaning this way, and that lets everybody know, okay, they're leaning towards access is fair, but it can't smooth out the whole road, and no more waivers is also fair, y'all go figure it out, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure I never feel like I'm threatening anybody,
Good job.
But you did.
but I did, and I had to.
Enjoyed working with him, solid,
Really.
very, very good.
It just, when somebody comes in and says, yes.
Well, and it's because I want you to know what's at stake and what's coming.
Oh, and the reason the Super Beat County is because refusal issue, the issue department, not us.
That doesn't assume it works.
I usually, when I
Don't
ask
have
a
pockets.
question, I know the answer.
Yeah, of course.
But thanks for working with us. I think it helped out.
Yes, that's what we want. I want the mud box to
I
continue.
know.
It's good, clean, family fun.
I don't want to leave for either, so. Well, thank you for working with us. Appreciate it.
Y'all know.
So this makes it look easier.
Oh, and Mr.
I'm glad we hopefully, voted just for me. I'm like, yeah. Be like, proof permanent fund, get rid of bumpers. I'll be like, free admission, first 10 kegs are on me, come my bug and ask me, oh, what, no bumper? I don't need to wait. All right, man.
You too, you too.
Oh, I was supposed to be for the hospital. So whatever happened with option 1, option 2? We stopped talking about it?
Nothing in our packet explains it, so I'm confused like, what?
Probably need to put back on. Silent.
Well, is he running? I didn't want to put that in place, but I could have, I thought of it.
Anyway, I'll talk with Dawn and see if she can find, if we can work this issue back on. It's an unresolved issue with a written ethics commission opinion that says she can't go in there until it is made. And, June is a year.
Yeah, I promise.
Alrighty. Thank you. Chris, you wanna hold hands and go walk over to my truck? It's easier for me to have a hold hands on the person than you. That would be inappropriate. Although, just so that wouldn't be so much talk. They walked in there,
So they petitioned the county for variances. And that's what all the argument is. Board or whatever it is, meeting Thursday. They're not real bright people. And
Hurry this up so we can watch this game. No,
Already knocked her out.
it knocked her out in third.
Somebody had a 3-run home run.
I'll tell you this, I told you, they should have thrown her last night. They have done let them know.
you don't have to do anything.
Excuse me, man, I cannot believe it.
Okay.
Eight to nothing.
Getting rolled.
So let's meet back to order. I believe we go to number 11, general business, right? The board to discuss speed limit change and request for the four-way stop sign at 7th Avenue East as attended by Commissioner Pickles.
I had a man by the name of Frank Mitchell that called me and was telling me a lot of stuff about the road he lives on. I asked him and he talked with his commissioner, who is Mr. Newman, and he said, yes, he had spoken to him. But he wanted me to come and look at his road and look at his situation also. So I did go and I looked at it, and he had asked for a dust hazard sign, and I think that was, some ditch work maybe, and, then, he said that he wanted a four-way stop sign at Seventh, Avenue East and First Avenue North. And that he wanted the speed limit changed, so I told him that in the past that we have not been keen on putting up four-way stop signs. That's been requested and, that we've not done that I know of. Because we found that we think it's more dangerous to have a four-way than to leave it like it is. And then in terms of the speed limit, I told him that, in order to change the speed limit, you have to have a public hearing, has to be advertised. So that's where we're at.
Okay.
I spoke with Mr. Mitchell, probably about 2 months ago, and in respect to the request, I would like to say thank you to the county staff. I think they've been very prudent, given the labor shortages and all the issues that have had to be worked through to get to this point. And, so thank you for those efforts and those accomplishments, is what I would say in respect to that. In reference to the speed limits and the four-way stop signs, been in the process of doing a bit of research down in that neighborhood, and I don't know if you got a chance to look. Did you get a chance to look in other areas there, adjacent streets, and the speed limits and restrictions requirements?
I've read through there.
In that, I've been looking at some of those, and you know, the limits, let's say, aren't necessarily consistent because of the different streets. So that's the way I see that. In reference to if that needs to be changed or not, I heard Mr. Mitchell. I understand his concerns, and so some of the steps that have been taken, I think, are addressing some of his issues. But in reference to just going to change the speed limit, I believe that we refer and depend on staff to look at statistical information, whether there be traffic infractions or accidents or things like that. So I have not gotten to that place to make a decision or request that the board move or hold a public hearing in reference to the four-way stop signs or a speed limit reduction. And it's not because I'm dismissing Mr. Mitchell, it's just the fact that I haven't completed gaining all the research that I feel like I need to make that decision. And honestly, the research that I've been doing is in reference to the traffic flows, law enforcement, and I'm in the process of speaking with the sheriff's office, talking with them about, you know, infractions, different things they've had down there as a history, to be able to understand better if that request is one that we can say that facts point to this direction, whether it be a four-way stop and a speed limit reduction, or just one or the other. So I'm still gonna be dependent on guidance from the staff and whether they use DOT. I believe I've heard a reference there about four-way stops, and if there may need to be, you know, bumpers and things like that put in the road, and different requests in areas that folks have said, we need a four-way stop sign here, that there is guidance that if you guys, if you'd like to speak or would help me out with that, that'd be fine. But I thought that the engineering folks used DOT guidance to stipulate if there were necessary four-way stops. And the reference I'm making is that into 2nd and 11th, I believe, where there was a request, and that staff did look into that kind of information to arrive at this determination.
Yes, you're correct in that we don't ever just indiscriminately put up a traffic control, whether that be a stop sign or a traffic signal for that matter. There are warrants. These are not just a state level, they're actually a federal level to establish consistency so that it's not just indiscriminate based on personal opinion or situations. So we follow that same system. When you ask us being staff, we will follow that procedure to give you a recommendation on whether or not it is appropriate based on having met those warrants or not. With respect to the speed, You know, it is very typical for jurisdictions to reduce fees based upon reactions to individual requests, but people tend to travel based on what the road will accommodate. They typically call it like the 85th percentile speed is what we would post something at. So based on what 85% of the drivers will do on that road based on its geometrics is typically how you arrive at a speed limit. So we can put the counters out there. Our counters are geared towards not only accumulating the volume of traffic, but they'll also characterize it and tell you how fast each vehicle is going over that time frame to be able to determine what is that 85th percentile to say, and I'll just use wild numbers just to make it just irrelevant here. Let's say that, you know, someone's saying that they're running 100 miles an hour down this road. We'll put a counter out there and we may determine that, you know, 90% of them are doing 30 miles an hour or less. So, you know, this individual may be reacting to that one speed situation that they saw, and because of that, everybody is that way. But we are very much receptive and appreciative of the fact of using data to dictate what our decision is versus just a personal request. So we would be happy to put out the traffic counters on both streets. I remember this situation coming up, and I think it was last year, matter of fact, and it was a visibility thing that was being questioned.
I think it was before the pandemic.
We looked at that and actually went down, and there were a few pine limbs that could have been trimmed. I think those were handled to ensure that, if I'm not mistaken, the east-west road is the paved road, the dirt road is the north-south direction, best I recall. Anyway, so we'll be happy to put the traffic counters out there to get that leg of the information, and some of that data goes into the warrant analysis for the four-way stop, but my guess is your volumes aren't nowhere near what's needed to justify a four-way stop. Because you have to have a certain delay from your minor road to the minor road traffic from the major road before you ever get into that situation. We have access to the state database of traffic history, accident history, so I can easily look at a particular intersection and tell you what's happened there in the last 20 years. And we look at that as well.
Well, I appreciate that, statistical, information. You give us factual guidance, not my opinion or what I may think needs to happen there. But in this case, with Mr. Mitchell, I didn't request that you guys go down there and get into that because I did ask, for staff to stop by and speak with Mr. Mitchell about the ditch. And, Mr. Evans did stop by and speak with him, and they did have a discussion as far as the scope of work they were expecting to get done, which I believe today is completed. And so, in this case, I had been looking at that information, but not trying to put counters out there if they were able to show up with the ditch maintenance and have all that stuff in one, let's say, bottle of wax. So, in respect to that, honestly, I am working towards trying to, get you guys to gather that information, not just for this intersection, but like I said, for several.
What we look at, it would come to us through a work request, usually funneled through a county administrator or someone else, and, just understand when we put traffic counters out there, you're immediately saying we're gonna collect it for a week, so it's not something we can just come back with the next day.
No.
At this point in time, the counters are sitting up in my office, and it's not, a big deal to basically go down and put them at anytime any of you guys have a concern about a particular location, we have that opportunity. I mean, might as well use the tools we have.
Right. Well, and that's what I wanted to depend on before we arrive to a decision in respect to the speed or the stop signs.
Yes,
I
please.
did understand that there was history at this other intersection, and so I wanted to try to revisit that when we get to that point. But I did not want to make that request, and you guys have counters down there and ditch maintenance and all these other things going on in the process. So I just felt like it was the best to, let's say, take one step at a time. And, like I say, I'm quite thankful that given the shortage and the labor issues that, staff has been able to get to this place with signage and the ditch maintenance. So, I'm not prepared, and I don't think we've got the information to make any, sign changes this evening, but I think once we get that information, it may, or it will indeed give us the stipulation that we either need to make an adjustment or that what's there will be sufficient given the statistics.
I would like to say that, Mr. Mitchell has called me several times, and he's texted me and emailed me, and I, just from my perception of talking to him, it didn't seem like it was as much about the speed per se, that he was more concerned about the dust and when they're speeding, it increases the amount of the dust, and he lives right next to the road. So I think, my perception was that he was more concerned of how can I alleviate some of this dust? Is it to stop the people from flying by my house? Or did you get that from him?
Oh, I got several indications from Mr. Mitchell. But honestly, what I agreed to with him was to have county staff meet with him in respect to the ditch maintenance, that agreed that we could do. And that we would look into the other requests as far as, the dust signs or the hazard and the four-way stop and the speed limit, request.
Yeah, I would just suggest that, you go the route, if it's decided that way, to use the suggestive signage of slow dust hazard versus the ones that carry regulatory connotations, that being your speed limits and your stop signs.
And that's what was put in place, was the dust hazard. All those involved, and, I'll be glad to get those requests in for the calendars and see if we can get more information.
As soon as we get them, we'll put it out.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Anyone else? How fast, what's the speed limit? in front?
35.
So, yeah, it's 35 on that particular street. It's 35, I believe, on First Avenue. So it varies across different ways. The research that I've done is it varies, from 25 to 35 miles an hour on those streets in that area.
So you actually.
And I'm assuming that's been arrived at, given that traffic pattern or those.
I wouldn't make that assumption, because a lot of those speed limits are, well before me.
Well, perhaps we can make those adjustments. We'll include that in the current request about that. We'll make sure.
We do an incremental approach, so when we see there's issues, we address it and make sure it's right.
I see. Well, I know of a couple down there that I think,
Feel free to put whichever ones you're aware of in a work request, and we'll look at the ones that we can.
but that data set is usually a week.
We typically require that the traffic is accumulated over the span of 1 week, so that it's representative of every day within the work week, or excuse me, within the calendar week. And then there's actually extrapolations that you can do to depend on whether it was collected in 1 week in January versus, how it's gonna react.
Seasonal.
Yeah, there's seasonal adjustments in there. But typically it gives you a good indication of how things happen. A lot of times you'll see heavier congestion on your Saturdays versus, so you wouldn't want to go out there and collect it on Thursday if typically Saturday is your data driver. So we try to encompass it at least a 7-day time
It
frame.
gives you a balanced or an averaged enough amount of statistical information.
Correct. It assembles it down to what's called, or termed, an average annual daily traffic number. And that is usually what we use to drive the rest of the analysis.
Is that something you think, given this time of year, would be biased or impacted, given?
I'm not sure how much transient traffic there is back in that area. Obviously, being on the cusp of a scallop season, if there are more transient type traffic, I would say that, late June would be a good indicator of like the worst type situation, or your July, early July.
Would be the highest escalation of.
That's what I think the heaviest saturation of traffic would be in that time frame.
Would that include, in those counters, would include golf carts, trucks?
It accumulates everything from a bicycle up to a major semi.
So all traffic.
There's 14 different classifications within the federal guidelines. 13 of those are categorized by vehicle, and 1 is an unknown. So I can tell you a percent of each type of vehicle that falls within a given classification, whether it was a passenger vehicle, a single unit delivery truck, or an 18-wheeler.
Well, and that's the kind of information I would rather depend on versus, I've looked at these speed limits down here. I'd rather depend on that 7-day data set to say, hey, we're within the 85%, or no, we're, you tweak that, so.
When it's regulatory and safety based, we don't shoot from the hip. We use data.
And I thought that was so, I mean, I thought there were guidance, whether it be, from federal or state here to you.
Stephen, you got that?
Yes, sir, I can work with the commissioners to enter a work order.
So we need to go on. Number 12. The board to consider approval of request for disc golf course at the Taylor County Sport Complex as agended by Commissioner English.
So I appreciate you guys, giving me the opportunity. I know I brought this to the workshop, we discussed, disc golf course at our complex, there's been a location identified. We're here now just to really, funding, we do have the funding available for this course. I would like to amend, this, talking about 18 T-pads, I would like to amend it to 14. I've spoken with the folks and they were, they were in agreement to 14, to give them to space it out just to keep the safety. And if there is a bigger event, they could put portable baskets in and then folks will be there to, they could kind of be there to monitor the safety aspects of people not being on top of each other. So they feel 14 T-pads and baskets are sufficient for this course. So, I'd like to make a motion to approve, this, moving forward with the funding for this disc golf course at our complex of up to, I'm just gonna say up to $15,000.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor? Okay.
And that included age groups from youth up, right?
Yes. That means as
8 to 60?
As young as you wanna go to as old as you can go.
Okay.
How do you throw it?
It's a frisbee.
You probably.
I make fun of them. I tell them they're just out playing frisbee.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's a basket, and it's really almost like golf, really. I mean, it's
structured the same way.
What it
Throw it
is.
like this?
I don't know if it's.
You can actually do it however you want.
This way.
Your underhand over
make
here.
it wide. Wherever it lands, you move on up and you throw it again.
If you don't get it, you kick it.
If you get a hole in one, if you get a hole in one, maybe there's a prize, I don't know.
I think it sounds real cool to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a growing sport. I mean, it really is a growing sport in the country.
I saw the cages hanging there with the chains and all hanging out of them.
Yes.
I walked over that thing, I tried to figure out what
You
that
thought it was
thing
a trash
was.
can, didn't you?
I said, must put some kind of feed in there. Look like some kind of feeder to me. I didn't know what the chain was, I mean, keep the critters out, or in.
Squirrel traps, they catch squirrels out there.
Now I know what it is, but I could see them things sitting there, I said, what the world it was?
You thought you might want one of them, huh? It was a feeder.
Yeah. Okay, so we did pass that, right?
I just want to remind the board that we don't have a construction crew, so, we'll have to get quotes for all the equipment, and we will start on it as soon as we can, but,
Will you take the assistance from that group, because they're going down the path to get the quotes, I would imagine, as far as the T-pads, concrete, and they're gonna lay out, they're gonna.
yes, it would help if they would flag where they want the pads
Yeah, I
and
did.
help us with, yes.
I did ask him to, let's give us a drawing, of the course, and kind of how it should be laid out, and they're willing to do that. And once they get that drawing, then we'll pass it along.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah, I made the same suggestion to him, that told him if they would get the GPS coordinates of the different hole locations,
Yes.
that I could assist them in preparing a map so that you guys can kind of see what the course layout is intended to be.
That would help a lot, and we'll need to get multiple quotes for all the equipment, or no quotes, but but is it Mr. Agner that's, okay, if he,
I'll have him get in contact.
that'd be perfect, and
I'll
then
have
I
him
can,
reach out to you, and then he'll be able to communicate
Yes,
all
sir.
that. They're getting quotes, with what he told me yesterday, so, and he can pass those quotes directly on to you guys.
that'll be perfect, and then that will help speed it up, and then really the main, part will just be to try to get some folks to help us, with the concrete work.
And they're willing to be a part of that as well.
Well, we do have volunteer applications that I can handle,
I mean, they really are, really. He said they're
It's
willing
great.
to be a part of that.
that will help, thank you.
Okay. We go to 13, county staff items. The board to consider approval of a local agency program, LAP supplement agreement to number 1. Construct a sidewalk along the Old Dixon Highway to consider adoption of a resolution authorizing the chairperson to accept such agreements as agendaed by Kenneth Dudley, county engineer.
So you guys probably remember, it was just last month that we came here and we received some bids from, 3 different contractors for the Old Dixie Highway sidewalk project. Those bids came in, they were reviewed, we presented our recommendation to you guys, but, part of that recommendation was that we recognized the funding was limited and insufficient, and then we weren't going to recommend any kind of an award or an actual contract execution, until that was worked out. So I posed that to DOT in typical fashion of asking, hey guys, is there a way that we can take and make up this difference? And it was about $40,000 between the lowest responsive bidder. There were some problems with the lowest bid, and he didn't sign some forms in there. So he was disqualified. We went to the second bid, and that's why DOT provided a concurrence of award, and that's what I presented to you guys. So what DOT has presented here and what I'm asking you to approve is a supplemental agreement which gives us sufficient monies to award this to Kurtz Construction, where it can be designed or constructed as bid. The resolution that's attached to here is very much the same as all of them, in that it's bestowing the chairman the permission to sign the supplemental agreement on behalf of the board as a whole.
What do we need to do?
You need to read the resolution.
Okay, read the resolution by title only.
All in favor?
All in favor?
This is a long one. Old Dixie Highway Sidewalk Supplemental Agreement Number 1, Signature Authorization.
All right.
That's the title.
Now, we need a
Now,
motion.
motion to approve.
Okay. Do I get a motion?
Motion is second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, you got it.
Now we need a motion to, do the contract. Right, to approve the supplemental agreement.
Okay,
Motion to approve the supplemental agreement.
that's second. Motion second, approve the supplemental agreement. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I want to say something to that. Kenneth, I want to thank you for securing that extra $44,000. You come through a lot of times in situations like this. I don't know what you do to do it, but, well, I do know, because they really like you at FDOT. They, I know that, so that has something to do with it. But I want to thank you for being able to do what you do and get that extra money for us like that.
And they told us they appreciate when a local jurisdiction produces a quality project. It makes it a lot easier for them to go to their secretary and other people and say, look, this is the situation we're in. If we provide this funds, they know what the outcome's gonna be. So, we follow their same specifications. So from our perspective, if we're providing the same quality of project as you guys, then hopefully there will be worth the support of funding for that same level of investment.
Well, they recognize that, what we do, when we do something, it's done right, and it's done good, and if it's, up to standard, or maybe a little bit better sometimes.
We want them to live beyond us.
Okay. Thank you, Kenneth. With number 14, I believe you might have something to do with that too, right? The board to consider approval of requests for funding for the proposed widening and resurfacing of the gas plant road under the Florida Department of Transportation, FDOT Small County Outreach Program. Scott as agendaed by county engineer.
So this is also a recent advertisement. This is one of our roads that was a previously state-owned roadway that was donated to us back in the 70s. And then the scrap and stop program came along to help provide some funding to address the maintenance of those roadways. The advertisement was received, there was 2 bids, I think, received from that. Anderson and I think maybe Kirk's Construction also on that one, if I'm not mistaken. And then Anderson was the lowest of those at $800 and some odd thousand. The original funding for this project was only at $700,000. This was one of the older ones. I think it was originally put on the priority list back in 2012. It stayed there for a few years and then it finally got programmed for that 5-year out time frame. So we finally approved the agreement, the funding agreement in 2018. We've gone through the design of that. So those funds have been encumbered. That was, I think, 170 or so. And so you already see we're chopping down on that original 700. And it was fairly obvious, and any time that I would provide status reports to DOT on where we were at on the job, I would give them those estimates and let them know, look, we are anticipating we're not gonna have enough money. So they know that, and they were expecting us to reach out again and say, you know, hey, can you help us here? This time was a little different. Their response wasn't just a supplemental agreement, here you go. They are looking, and I'm sure it's just an indication of how tight their funds are. They're getting to the point that they're wanting to see, have you made an effort to self-solve this? And that's where I'm at, is that I would like to say that if we have a commitment to this job, then perhaps maybe like some of the recent ones that we've done, let's put skin in the game and realize that if we do that, I think it's gonna play favorably in our hand for them to take and make up the balance of what we can't put in it. I put a suggestion in there. It's an $800,000 project. There's 170 on design. You could easily expect over 100 and around 100 on the CEI expense. So adding those two together, you're talking about $1.1 million. If we could put that one in there for that 100,000, we're getting essentially 10 more cents for our 1 cent, is the way I kind of look at it from a local funding perspective. So that's what I'm suggesting, and I think they would be, my reading of their conversation is that if we can get to this commitment level, I feel pretty confident they're going to make up the difference in that supplemental.
You know, in the past, when, in our district, when we've had situations like this, we've historically taken some of our own funding and put that toward it in addition to some funding from the common account. I know I put some of my own money, when I say my own money, you know, I'm talking about what I get out of the gas tax for the Kingston town. Would you be willing to do that?
You know, I would rather, you know, this district, you know, funding is more for, to me, for safety type issues that we need to address within our district. I would rather if the board would approve, let's take it off on the common account.
We only got $562,000 in it, that's way down.
How much?
562 is all we got.
And I'll say 2 things. One, the individual accounts aren't necessarily just for safety. You know, it's our hope of if you were to go through the paving priority policy, or the paving policy, you'll see that if you elected to say, I wanna do Tree Road 1, 2, 3, and I'd like to improve that to a paved surface, what we would look to is that district's funds first to make that improvement, before we then go and move to the common account. What I have done in the past, which is what you referenced to, kind of depending on the overall character of the road, would be whether I would walk in here and say, given the nature of how the traffic is on this road, it's really more appropriate to take it out of the common account because it's more than just a district level contribution. It's really a huge connector. Something like Foley Cutoff Road is a prime example. You're coming from a US highway to a major collector for this county, it's appropriate to pull that money out of your common account. If you have funds in your district account, that's great, but I could easily stand here and support that I think it's more of a regional type importance, and it should go for the common account. To address the 500,000, she made that same comment. And yes, you're right, it is lower than it has been, but I think you can't look at the level that it's at without being aware of how we got to there. So let's look at what we've done recently. And, you know, we pulled monies out of there, but we finished Houck Road. We pulled monies out of there, we finished Foley Cutoff Road. We pulled monies out of there, and we're working on Ellison, that's north and east Ellison. You know, so there's been a lot of accomplishments that have got us to this point. And that's what those monies are for. It's not there to have $5 million sitting in there. It's there to help offset these differences of these projects that we have. When we know we're getting funding from outside sources, we have relied on it for over a decade now to help offset that deficit one way or another so that we can finish those major important jobs. So that's why I didn't limit it to just saying, you know, Mr. English, you need to give all your District 1 funds. I threw to you guys, let's think about it. You know, think about the character of the road, think about its importance, and say, maybe it's appropriate to pull a little bit out of here, and let's say we could pull some out of District 5. Maybe we could pull some out of District 2. It doesn't matter when you get to that point, as long as you guys collectively are making that type of decision.
Mr. Chairperson,
Yes,
can
ma'am.
I ask our engineer a question? Do you anticipate any other projects that may need additional funding before the end of the fiscal year, besides gas plant?
Cedar Island is the one I'm designing right now, so there's a good possibility that one's gonna fall short. You know, it's 4/10 of a road, and I wanna say it's a $500,000 project. I'm designing it in-house, so that's gonna help offset that design expense. I'm not at the point that I'm finished with it, so I haven't started my cost estimates, but it wouldn't surprise me that, you know, for it to need some additional, just given the overall length of that road.
That's only for the paved portion.
That's correct, yes, sir. So all I've done within the scope of work is a resurface, it'll probably be a widening resurface on there.
But I mean, existing pavement, not.
That's correct, but you know as well as, you probably know as well as I do, even in your short tenure, that drainage is like a major issue down there. So what I try to do is I will re-establish the conveyance there to take that water away from the beach road and move it back down to that canal system. So yes, that is one that I'm anticipating is gonna be a cost. That's the only two I have in the foreseeable future. A few years back, DOT made us move into, if you're gonna ask for a road to be on the list, you're gonna sit down and do a detailed cost estimate. Because if you come back to us and say you don't have enough money, it's gonna be your fault, it's not gonna be our fault. So that's what I've had to start doing, so when you guys say, well, I wanna put road 1, 2, 3 on there, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for me to put those things together. But when I put them together, I want them to be sufficient to where I don't have to stand back up here, and I don't have to ask DOT for additional money. So I try to be as all-encompassing as I can, because historically, as you see in this job, DOT literally did nothing more than said, how long is it, times this number, and that's how much you get.
And most of the time, it comes up short.
And I went through their estimates years and years ago, and I told them, I said, guys, you're not even including this and this and this and this, but you're expecting me to produce the same quality of job as you produce. Why aren't you funding it the same way you fund it? And then it was, you know, several years later, they finally got to where they said, put your money where your mouth is, and you do the cost estimate.
Would it be possible for the district to fund 50% of that in the common account, 50%?
I would not have an objection to that. I think it's at least recognizing that the district representative felt, whether it was you or your predecessor, felt sufficient importance for it to be one of the candidates. That's the way I look at it.
Right, he did.
I would give, based on your review of this, I mean, it really is a regional issue within the community that I would like to make a motion to take this 100,000 from our common account.
That's one little bit more, right? The common account. Common account is the one that got
Doesn't affect-
$100,000 also.
Yeah, it's 500,000, but that's a separate cost or a separate account from your individual district
It
account.
doesn't affect your individual district.
Okay.
Now, how much money do you need? How much are you short?
What I'm suggesting is, if we do this 100, it's gonna be real close to what the CEI expense is gonna be. And then I'm going to use that suggestion as, if DOT is gonna fund this, then they need to fund the design and construction. And then we'll manage the inspection of that completion. So that'll put them giving us an additional 350 or something, I forget what the number is, if we can commit that additional 100.
Now, you want it all taken out of the common account. You don't want to spend none of your money. And what was your suggestion?
My suggestion would be the district will take 50% of the funding in the common account and supply 50%.
I agree, I think, because we've all given money, I've given it on most of my roads, it's been done. It's just a common practice.
If we need to vote on, or see about a second from Mr. English, I mean, I made a motion to take the 100 out of the
Common account, okay. You go along with that? Just a second? All in favor? No, hey, take it out. Aye. Take it out of common account. All right.
So, May,
No, I would suggest 50% from the district and 50% from the common account, so I would be a no.
I'm a no too, I think that's a fair
Okay.
way to do it.
Okay.
Sir? No problem. All right, thank you, guys.
All right. Board to consider approval of Fire Station 2 construction bid package, notice and advertised as agenda by Dan Castle. Kachi.
Good evening, everybody. Just as it says, we've got our bid package ready for the state appropriation money to build a new fire station 2 on the north side of town. Everything you've gotten for the design and everything like that, I will not take credit for that. I'll give it all to Kenneth. If he didn't help me with it, it would not look that good, I promise you. It's very thorough. We're going with the design intent bid, so this way we're kind of putting some of the work on them instead of us having to do it all. Any questions?
Mr. Chairperson?
Yes, ma'am.
Dan, can you just clarify for the board that the way this grant, this proposal has worked, it's a legislative appropriation that we received. We do not receive a grant contract.
Until we have a contract, until we contract with a company.
Right.
So we have to go out and advertise the bid, award the bid. We'll give that to the state fire marshal's office, and then they'll give us a contract for the money.
So we have an intent to fund, but we don't have an executed grant contract, just for the board's information.
Time-wise on that one, we had a deadline for the end of the year to have that completed, so we're actually looking pretty good in our timeline. We're not falling behind or anything.
Motion to approve?
Can I ask a question? I mean, just at the risk of being the bad guy. That's a little scary though, isn't it? To award a contract and not have funds to encumber something?
Well, so I guess my question would be, do you have a draft contract in this packet? Then does it need to be, Conrad, does it need to be amended to read that it's contingent upon the award of the actual award of the funding? And then we can protect ourselves that way?
Okay, so I'll put some verbiage together and I'll forward it to you and then let Conrad review that and make sure it's okay, because we use the EJCDC document template. I'll have to think about that, because.
That's why I brought it up. I
have to
just
move
thought
into
about
the
it as well.
instructions to bidders and tell them, awards contingent on such and such, but from what I heard is we would execute a contract, and that it's like a chicken and egg thing here. It's like you gotta execute the contract in order to get the funds.
Well, I think we have to award the bid.
Is it just a notice of award? Because there's no money committed at that point.
Right.
From my understanding with the state fire marshal's office, is we have to go out to bid, award the bid to somebody. And that's what we need to show them, is that we've awarded the bid.
Okay, then
Not
all I would
execute the
ask.
contract until
I wouldn't have to change contract. If a notice of award is sufficient to meet that obligation, then we don't have to change anything. Because we can issue a notice of award, and that just says, we have the intent to award it to you. It usually has our documents in that, which the counterparts, which would be a contract. We would forward it to the lowest responsive bid. They would execute it, but we won't until we get our ducks in a row and have our money in order.
That's the way DOT does it sometimes. You know, when they're the ones.
Yes, sir. That's the way I would normally do it. So if that's the case, then I won't change anything in the documentation you may wanna just ask.
If we verify that, so I'm fairly certain that it's, because all they needed was an awarded bid.
Okay. It just made me nervous when I heard it.
So does the motion need to change then?
I wouldn't think so, it would, to be contingent upon.
Yeah, you need to put that in.
Yes, to be
Okay.
contingent upon the funding.
How do you want to say it?
Just approval of the county engineers.
Actually, I would think you would just make a motion to approve the request for proposal package. And if you want to do a contingent, you would contingent on the notice of award being sufficient to meet the grant obligation.
Yes, that's what I'd like to make the motion to be.
Okay, we got a second on that?
I'll second.
All right, motion second, all in favor? Okay.
Thank you.
Attorney, got draft resolution renaming County Road 14 and on Leroy Tedder.
The one that's in your packet has been redone. We've got more meat to it. Usually when we're doing recognizing something, we do read the whole thing.
Read the whole thing?
Motion to read the resolution in its entirety.
That's it, motion.
Second.
Resolution.
All in favor?
I was chomping at the bit.
That's right.
A resolution of the Board of County Commissioners naming County Road 14 in honor of Taylor County citizen Norman Leroy Tedder Sr. for his service to his country and his service to the state of Florida. Whereas Norman Leroy Tedder Sr. of Taylor County, Florida was born November 30th, 1919 in Shady Grove, but was raised in Oakland. He was 21 years old when he enlisted in the United States Army on September 11th, 1941. He was among the Allied troops that stormed the beach at Normandy on June 6, 1944. He was said to be one of the few men from his boat who survived. He was later assigned to the Red Bull Express, which supplied General Patton's fuel, ammo, and food as he charged through Europe. In the late summer, they were in a convoy of trucks and a German plane strafed the convoy. During this action, he was in the .50 caliber turret and his friend was driving. As a result, he was hit in the legs and his friend was killed. And whereas Mr. Tedder, after the war, moved to Michigan with his new wife, who was from there, they returned to Taylor County 8.5 years later, settling on his family's farm near Oakland, the Ecofina. He became a farmer, a cattleman, and helped with establishing Hickory Mound. He rarely spoke about his service. He died on November 3, 1978. And whereas the Board of County Commissioners of Taylor County wish to honor Norman Leroy Tedder Sr. as a great American, now therefore be it resolved that County Road 14 shall now be known as Norman Leroy Tedder Sr. Road, passed and adopted in regular session and will be the 7th day of June 2021.
I'll make a motion to approve the designation of Highway 14 in honor of Leroy Tedder.
I'll second.
Motion second, all in favor? Aye. Okay.
It's really appropriate because we just got through the anniversary of November the 6th, 1944, when they stormed the beaches at Normandy.
Mark Violet, 3384 Slaughter Road. I was just gonna say, I had nothing to do with it whatsoever, but, a very nice article we had in last Friday's paper.
It sure was.
Yes, it was. A lot of,
You had nothing to do with it.
I didn't write it, I just.
a lot of detail in that event.
Okay. County administrator.
I did receive a message from our finance director, Danielle Welch, and she has given me, some tentative dates for budget workshops. And I thought maybe it would be nice for us to go over these dates to make sure they work with everyone.
Are you wanting an answer tonight?
No, ma'am, not necessarily. I'd like to provide some dates.
You can email them to us tomorrow, too, so we can have time to.
We just wanted to make
Calendar.
sure, yes, ma'am, we just wanted to make sure everyone had sufficient time
Sure.
to see if these would work with your schedule. So the dates are July 19th, July 22nd, July 26th.
Hold on.
Okay.
That's birthday, July 26th.
Well,
Birthday.
you don't have to do it on your birthday.
What that day? 7/26.
Yes,
That's
and
birthday.
July 29th, and that would be the special meeting to set the proposed general fund and MSTU millage rates. So all of these meetings would start at 9:00.
In the morning?
Yes, sir, and end at 2:00, if that is the pleasure of the board.
Repeat that, please. 9 to 2?
Yes, sir. So we've got July 19th, July 22nd, July 26th if needed, and July 29th for the special meeting. But it sounds like just July 26th would not work.
Well, we can have a birthday party.
Okay.
Could you provide the cake?
Yes, we'll just send money. Just send money.
I want no present cash.
So I can email the dates tomorrow, and then we'll work with y'all the best way we can. Okay, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Was there anyone, were we supposed to ask them? Was there any callers in on this? No call. None.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say, after we approved the sheriff's details, boat ramps seem to be working well. I have not gotten a multitude of complaints. Went through Memorial Day last weekend, and so there's also signs down at Stinghatchee to route folks around certain ways, keep them from being collected into that traffic pattern. So, thank you to the board, thank you to the sheriff's office, and all those staff members that are taking part in that. I know you Anderson had a part in helping get those signs in place. So we're grateful that things are moving forward, and glad to see all the folks enjoying outdoors and things, trying to resemble some normalcy. So thank you to staff for the work that's been accomplished, and we'll look forward to the next event.
Was it July?
Well, yes, sir, or the 26th, if we want to wait.
Oh, okay.
That birthday cake.
Ms. Speaker.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to the board for us being able to work through some really trying times. Maybe we're on the right track with some of this stuff. I want to say thank you to staff for all that you do. Thank you to the fire chief, sheriff's office. I'm so glad to see the newspaper men back. It's good to have you here. That's all. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to bring up a thing that was brought to my attention yesterday, and I checked several different counties. If somebody loses their home and everything they've got in a fire, for the county to, I thought it would be a good idea if some counties do this, they waive all fees, the county fees, when they go to build back or get another house trailer or whatever. In the past, in other counties, in Taylor County in '93, after the storm of the century, they waived the fees after people lost their homes and that kind of thing. But a lot of counties do that every time somebody gets burned out, a family gets burned out, and they don't have anything left. They waive all the fees. And what one case, fellow got thrown out here in Taylor County the other day, and his fees was between $700 and $800. Now, he got paid. His employer paid it forward. He didn't have to, his employer helped him get another trailer and helped him get started boat loads of the children and all that kind of stuff. But that $700 or $800 would have went a long way, toward him getting started over again. And I was just thinking about us and to kind of get something together about waiving the fees when somebody gets their home burned out.
I'm all for that.
And I mean, it's just a good thing.
Yeah, why don't you put it on the agenda for the next meeting and let's do that.
Okay, that'd be great. Appreciate it. That's all I got.
Appreciate everybody's help, I appreciate y'all help keeping me straight and, hard job. Why it has the same problem. With that, what do I hear?
Motion to adjourn?
Okay. Do we motion that too? All in favor? All right.
Good job.
They came in handy tonight, didn't they?
Made it on time. My teeth.
What score?
Yeah.
Florida State.
I'm despair. That wasn't even like just, 50 acres, but I had it contained. But there was, when you first started, a lot smaller, but it ended up in just running. So it was running at houses and trying to jump Jody Morgan. And I was like, I gotta go. Kept no structure loss, damage. Probably Jody Morgan down for a couple hours because I was running it. I don't think you'll hear anything from it, but it should do, just so you know.
Get some breadcrumbs or something like that.
These business to get it all transferred
Ooh.
over, so it never got done. They got a mess. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.